Lace 'em up, let's start the show. We're digging in with Trip. 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 We're digging in with Trip today. Yeah.
Oh, that tune never gets old. You know what? Somebody, my brother, the great Tim Tracy, somebody just said on Twitter that we should have a contest. Those that think that they can sing the Digging In tune the best. I fully encourage that feedback on our handles, Dig In Trip on Twitter and on Instagram, of course, the leader in the clubhouse and then some. In terms of our Digging In guests would be the great Scotty McCreary, the closet guy that could really make an impact, a future guest, Brett Roy Hobbs Hedekin, but anybody else that wants to make an attempt at singing our tune or a variation of it, we welcome that feedback. My brother, Tim Tracy, what a stellar job. A couple of housekeeping issues. Speaking of our Twitter and Instagram handles, on any of our podcast or YouTube platforms, we encourage very honest feedback of where we're at, how we can be better. And we want to also welcome you to ask questions about this particular episode or any episodes or anything in general that we will certainly answer for you on the very next episode after those questions are submitted. Now that we've done that, this particular episode, this is a special one because Paul Maurice was instrumental in convincing me to start digging in with my producer and partner, Adam the Admiral Holtzman. So this episode is exclusively sponsored by the most loyal of sponsors, and that is New Country Auto Group. Well, they scream loyalty. They scream unselfishness, which is surprising because one of their owners, it's a family-owned auto group, Jared the Nooch Cantanucci, he wasn't selfish with the puck when he had 152 points in 50 games at one of the elite prep schools in the United States, in the state of Minnesota, Shattuck St. Mary's. Guys like Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Zach Parise, just to name a few, went through Shattuck. So he wasn't selfish on the ice. Then he goes to Harvard to really further his academia, and he's not selfish at all in the auto group that he is the maestro of, with dealerships in Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Florida. I am a consumer, having bought a car from his West Palm Beach Mercedes dealership. You're talking about BMW, Ferrari, Porsche, Maserati, Mercedes. List goes on and on. Lexus. The New Country Auto Group, the very definition of service, customer care, unselfishness, and just flat out pure excellence. And they're never satisfied. No complacency. Always looking to figure out how they can be better. And in their case, la meilleure, the best. newcountry.com, the New Country Auto Group. With that being said, I want to dig in now with a guy that I've known here in the Detroit area. He played his junior hockey with the Windsor Spitfires. That has catapulted him into one of the finest and long-standing careers for head coaches in NHL history. Now, we'll dig in, and let me grab my shovel with Paul Maurice. This is a particularly special digging in episode because the two people, one off screen and my brother that I want to welcome in a second, they are the two people that encouraged me to get involved with this podcast to begin it. Adam the Admiral Holtzman, my producer, and my long time friend, Winnipeg Jets head coach, Paul Maurice. He really told me to get on the forecheck and do it. So this is special, really beyond words, to dig in with my buddy Paul. Paul, as we start every show, now that you got me to do it and we're entrenched, I've got the shovel out. How do you define digging in?
That would be, well, first of all, congratulations. I think it's outstanding that you're doing this. You know, the truth is a lot of times when I get a Hurricane game on, I'll put it on if I'm doing something else. Don't take that the wrong way, but I'll turn up the volume and like kind of walk around the house or my office or whatever, just to listen to you call the game. So I don't really need to watch it. I just like to listen to you call the game. So congratulations on doing this. I think it's going to be great. I'm happy for you because you're going to be great at it. The answer to your question, I would say on a serious note, is about me digging in, and you know the life, and you've had this great perspective, right? You're a player, but also a player that the game didn't necessarily come easily to. You didn't play 17 years in the NHL, so you had that perspective, and then you've had the perspective of a broadcaster, but an embedded broadcaster, which is a completely different animal. You've got 2 o'clock in the morning and had to be at the pregame skate prep the next day. You know what that life is like. So when you say digging in for me, so many of the great stories in this game and the people around it are things that happened, funny or kind of miraculous or very impressive performances under pressure, right? When things aren't going right, when things aren't going the way that you want them to go, and then you got to dig in, and that's when your character gets tested. Like it's funny because I always when I start talking like this, the first thing I think about is the military, and I kind of caution myself with Paul, like, seriously, you coach a hockey team, how hard is it? You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to carry a gun to work, and you don't have to go into battle. But next to that, for a guy like me, who isn't in harm's way with his work, when do you get tested as a man or as a woman, as a person? When do things get hard? What do you do? So that things get hard, and you have to endure the pressure or the travel or the grind of life. Then you dig in. So now what I'm thinking, though, you're going to get a lot of great stories here, but there's also some of the best humor, right? When you laugh, when things are painful, and you and I have been through a few of those. That's the great part about digging in is some of the people that you meet while you're doing it.
It's I want to get into so many things, and by the way, because I thought about saying we're going to go 5 minutes on where I ask the questions and 5 minutes where you do, but I want you to feel free with complete autonomy and authority, Coach, to grab the bull by the horns at any point in time. There's so many things I want to get to, but humor, and I want to start, with these second rounds going on right now, because a guy that flourished for you in one of your second round wins for Carolina, Tim Gleason, told me this morning, he said, and you got him to play the best he did in his career, Mo, that Mo had a command of the room, that he knew when to tell the guys that there was more to give, but he also knew when it was pressurized that a good joke was needed. And your players will always say across the board that they've never come across a guy with wit like yours. Let's start there. When you think about, because you just mentioned the military, what does it mean to maximize commanding the room as a National Hockey League head coach?
So I would say there's let's talk about two different scenarios, and one is when you can feel it. So to Tim's comment, and I really appreciate that, when you're operating at the right frequency as a leader, if that makes sense to you, those things then will come natural, because you know when you need to squeeze a little harder because you can feel it, and you know when you need to lighten things up because you're a part of it. That part, I think, is the part where probably coaches, leaders, whoever, get weeded out over time. If you don't have that, then you're probably not getting to a high level. The hard one is when the pressure gets at certain points. Let's say it a different way. When emotion gets involved, when you are over emotional as a leader, and sometimes maybe even under emotional, right? You're not wired to your team. Then you got to making decisions that you're not feeling, that you're just kind of thinking your way through, and you're hoping a little bit. But I think I think over time, Trip, I've always been fairly tied to my team, and maybe that's, you've heard the statement, the guy's lost his room or he's lost his team. Maybe that's what's happening. You're not on the same as your players, so you can't tell when to squeeze and when to pull off, because usually there's two things. Usually things aren't going well when you seem to be squeezing the hardest. So that gets to be real delicate, right? You can ask your team for more a bunch of times, but there's a place where they don't have any more to give you. And when you cross that line of asking you more, you exhaust your team mentally as much as physically, right? You're constantly grinding them for more. There has to be that recognition that these guys are at their max right now. And the next level for our team isn't a greater effort. And sometimes it's a better flow. It's a better ease. It's kind of, as you know, playing probably the position that demands it most in hockey between the night pipes. There's nights trying as hard as you've ever tried and you just can't find the rhythm of the game. And then there's nights that you're in the flow that you know that you're not getting beat. You're just not getting beat. You can feel it. So when a coach is dealing with a player that's flowing, that's easy. But when he's not, then coming off that at the right time might be the single most important thing that you do with your goal. I'll give you an example, like live day. Connor Hellebuck is a player that truly would play all 82 games because he comes to the rink just about feeling great just about every night. Like, that's his gift. He can come to the rink and say, I truly feel like I'm going to get a shutout every night. But not all, obviously that doesn't what's happened. So he had 2 or 3 phenomenal months that we just ran him this year at separate teams. But now in his development, we started to talk about this, and I talked about this with him yesterday. What about the times where you're feeling great, but it's not happening for you? That's almost in his leadership role then as a player, he kind of needs to come to me and said, yeah, I feel great, but it's just not happening. Let's stagger some starts here for a little bit till I get going. Anyway, as all my answers trip, that'd be a very long-winded answer into finding the rhythm of your team and being in tune with them will tell you where the breaking points are and when to pull off. As far as being funny, hockey's a funny sport, man. Like I think because there's a great culture in our sport, and if you're in a locker room long enough, you kind of get to the point, you know what guys think is funny and what they don't. And if you're in tune with that, it's like, there's nothing worse with a guy trying to be funny when he's not. And I've been guilty of that. But if you're in tune with your team, you can be funny.
Do you, over the course of time, whether it be in Carolina, Toronto, Winnipeg, even dating back here in the Detroit area when you're coached in the OHL, if you had to pick what you would think is your best nickname for any one of your players, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a dangerous. Okay, so you know that there's like two sets of nicknames. No, I know.
We're digging in.
I know we're digging, but I want to dig in. I don't want the earth then put back on top of me after this show's over. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want to get buried while I'm digging in.
You have the ability of immense like IQ to ponder what you can go with here.
Yeah, I think the best nickname. How about I just not tell you? Is a guy that I won't tell you his name. Just the guy that was Snacks. A guy's nickname was Snack, and he liked hanging around the ice cream bar at the end. A little bit of a challenge with weight, but it became Snack David after a while when Connor McDavid came in the league. And then so Snacks got morphed into just about every nickname going. But the nicknames, and this is true of coaches too, but from a player's point of view, it's pretty basic, right? So we play a little game here. Whenever we get a new guy, we put him at one end with all the pucks, and the guys skate up the middle of the ice, and he has to pass them a puck. But he's not allowed to pass them a puck unless they call for him. Up any name that they want to call for them, and you hear some inappropriate stuff, and it's really. But the goal is to, by the end of it, have a nickname for him, and then we sort of let him pick it unless somebody else thinks he's got a better nickname. So, but coaches have a whole other set of nicknames for players, and they're usually none of them are flattering, right? Players do for me too, and for coaches, but yeah, we've got a set of nicknames for. Guy that isn't very nice, and we only use it in the coach's room.
No, it's interesting. I want to ask you about that because Dean Chenoweth, who is a huge fan of your work, and he's a dear friend of our dear friend, one of your assistant coaches in Carolina, Randy Dr. Evil Ladisser. And so, and what Dean has said about Rod so far, Rod Brindamore as a coach, is that whatever happens in the coach's room, probably right as you finish a period. And then when you go in as a coach, I'm sure sometimes you go in right at the end of the period, but let's say you go into the coach's room first and then you address your team, that if there is any type of snap, if there's any blowing off steam, it always seems to happen in the coach's room. Then the message is always in a different way, the right one. Can you talk about that process?
Oh, I think first of all, I think it's necessary, right? You get off the bench. So tremendous amount of emotion for players, but maybe even more so for coaches, because we don't have a physical outlet, right? You guys can run around, throw hits, get into a fight if things aren't going your way. The coaches just grind their teeth and chew gum, right? So you're wired when you come off the bench. And yeah, all the three guys who made silly plays just get killed in the office. But I almost think that's necessary, cathartic. You leave it there. And then when you walk into the locker room, clearly, that's not how you feel. So we have our rule here is you're not allowed. And so I don't know if I can use the word bitch, but that's bitch about something. You're not allowed to bitch about something that you're not actively trying to fix. Kill a guy for 20 minutes on a practice day, as long as you're trying to fix what you're killing him about. But if you're not trying to fix it, you get cut off. So are you doing anything to fix that? I agree with you. Is there a way we can fix that? And if you're not doing anything, you're not allowed to bitch about it. So in between periods, for sure, right? Everybody gets killed. And just so in the players' room, right? They're getting killed because they're not getting played enough, right? And now they may not be saying it. Everybody's got their complaints. But when we hit that room to getting better, like you really got to leave that stuff. I find for me that works, especially early on, maybe more emotional when I started. Get it out of you in the coach office and don't bring it back into the players' room, because I would say almost all of what you would consider now tough conversations for me would happen one-on-one with the player on an off day. Yes, there's some barking on the bench, and every once in a while there's some barking in the locker room, but now it's more direct, because a lot of the players that have come through now have never heard it, have never been called out like that in a room, right? So you got to be careful with it.
Well, it's pretty cool, because I'm not tech savvy, so I'm still using my phone, to tape these digging in sessions. So at the top of the screen, as you were just saying that, a text came in, and I was able to read about 3/4 of it, and it came because I have my own set of nicknames, and it came in from Mr. GQ. Now, Mr. GQ is your one-time captain, Eric Stahl, and I asked him about you this morning. It's because he did a GQ shoot early in his career, and he asked me to go with it because, he was on the beach. He had, donkeys in his hands. It was out of his comfort zone.
So there you go. I would have thought that was Weeksy, but no. Okay.
We'll get to Weeksy in a minute. But so, from what I read, because I can't turn it up and look at the whole time, but he said, Paul, always, best I've ever seen, had the ability to get his team in the right mindset in the locker room. And then he went ... and he said, in particular, in a playoff series. So how is a playoff series, based on what Eric, that's a heck of a compliment, based on what he's saying, how is a playoff series different in your approach and execution?
So everybody operates a different way, right? The playoffs for me, I think part of that, and you would know this, there wouldn't have been a lot of teams over the last 25 years where we went into the playoff series as a favorite. I mean, we just weren't particularly favored, I guess. So how do I do this? What are your strengths and weaknesses? I think what I'm good at is I can walk into a room and I can feel the room. And that is kind of how I operate. So I will spend the day kind of feel my words for what I'm going to say before we go out or before a game. And I do it as I'm cutting my video. So when I do my pre-scout, I'll start with 85 clips and I'll get that thing down to 20 and I do them over and over again. And I'm walking around the room. So I might not have, I don't have the exact words but I'm trying to feel that room, feel the energy, feel the nervousness, interact with a few guys that we call maybe bellwether guys that if I talk to them, I got a pretty good idea where the room is at, right? And some of it is morning skate feel, but that would probably be what I'm good at. I think I can walk into a room and feel a room. And then by the time we got to the playoffs, to the point that we weren't always contenders, that underdog feel, the pressure would almost be off our team a lot of times because we had made the playoffs. So then it was about excitement. And that's something you can really tap into. When you can really tap into the pressure that we can put on another hockey team because of that underdog status and that drive we can put on another team and frustrate them and get them excited about that and get them to enjoy that process, because we probably, having made the playoffs, would have done that all year, right? Just grind, but there's almost no payoff in the middle of the season other than the playoffs, which is a long way away. Now it's It's right here in the next 2 weeks. All the things that we've been doing so well all year to get us here is what we need to do. And you can kind of tap into that. But it goes back to your first question. It's why you're such a good interview. It's going. The feel of your room and having that feel is the great challenge in coaching. It's not the X's and O's. Everybody has a version of them, but the feel of your room is a piece to be able to wire a team up.
And I want to, for the most part, stay in the room. But Mo, just because we're right in these second rounds, and you've had 3 dramatic, huge second round wins off the top of my head in your career. And I was lucky enough to be your broadcaster for 2 of them. One was against the Montreal Canadiens in 2002 en route to a Stanley Cup final. One that I want to get to in a second because Eric Stahl was a huge part of it against the Boston Bruins and Scott Walker scoring in overtime in Game 7. And then with Winnipeg, big win in the second round over Nashville a few years ago. And right now the second round is going on in both bubbles. The X's and O's, okay? A couple of things. One's feel, actually. Let's go feel first. Because I just talked to Scotty Walker, who his wife, Julie, was diagnosed privately. I'm not sure maybe you can tell us when you found out during that playoff series. And he eventually, as the script would have it, scored the overtime winner to beat Tim Thomas in Boston. I'll never forget it. But when was it? Because Scotty said to me, he thought it was a brilliant field decision and an adjustment because Chara was in his prime, Zdeno Chara. And I think did he have Eric Stahl playing with Ray Whitney and who first initially?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have no idea. You would remember that better than, I remember the details of the final decision of where we got to.
Well, you bumped up Scotty Walker and you changed the series.
Right. So Scotty's come up because we're struggling a little bit on that right side and we're going into Game 7. So the question I'm asking is one of two. Either this is the perfect scenario for Scotty Walker because the story on this happens. It's a great series, right? It's a back and forth series. We've got one of the dominant young players in the game and he's just starting to come in. He's won a Stanley Cup, but now he's a driving force right on the ice. And we've got some good veterans mixed around it. And then they've got Chara, right? They've got the big defender at the back end. And it's still in that old school battle. There's still a lot of heavy hockey being played, right? Aaron Ward, who and Scotty get tackled up and Scotty hits him with a punch that's late. And the question is whether Scotty's going to, I think that's Game 5, whether he's going to get suspended or he's not going to get suspended. And at that time, Scotty comes in and he explains the situation. So he's apologizing because he's not sure whether we're going to, the game's over. So that I really didn't have a problem with the play because the game at that point was over. We had lost that game. But he was really upset because he felt he put us in a tough spot. How are the referees going to view us going forward, all that kind of stuff. And then he explained to me about his wife's cancer diagnosis. So in that, and he'd been carrying it alone and it was going to get out. That was, when somebody's in a hospital and it gets out, there's so many people that treat cancer patients. This wasn't something we could keep quiet. So eventually, it came out. And so I know you're going into Boston Game 7. You need a little bit of a boost, right? You need something. And I felt that with Scotty's personality, he kind of needed a place to put all that emotion and all that energy. And if he was sitting in the 4-hole or the 3-hole, he'd have been just spinning, right? And he was the energy catalyst that we needed. And I probably at that point in my life, I truly, maybe I in karma a little bit more. I thought with everything this guy's been through, he was due for something good to happen. And the guy, he's got this lovable, positive energy personality, right? So he's not an energy drainer. This guy brings energy. And so everybody knows that Scotty's going through. When they find out he's playing with the big dog, everybody's going, that's right. Good for Scotty. It's almost win one for Scotty. And for what they were going through. And that probably, that for sure, Trip, and I'm going to try to get to this, the single most emotional event of my hockey career wasn't beating Toronto in Toronto or anything. It was walking off the plane after that, right? So his wife's standing kind of at the tarmac, and all the wives are there, and it's the first time that everybody's together, having learned about the diagnosis. And he wins. He scores the game winner. And so I'm standing back watching this with tears in your eyes, going like it couldn't get more beautiful than that, right? It was the sense of team, of togetherness, of fear with what she was going through, of all of that. It was most, maybe my most cherished 10 hours from the time he scored that goal. Ronnie Francis, I don't know if I've told anybody this, but Ronnie Francis is laughing at me after. So Ronnie Francis is part of that group. And he says that on the bench, I was jumping up and down, yelling, "There is a God, there is a God." I was so happy for that guy. And then for the Walkers, and she's fine. So everything turned out great.
Gosh, I wish we had the bench camp. Did you have any kind of vertical?
No. Yeah, not too bad, actually. I think I was knees up pretty good. Yeah.
I want
pretty good.
That is, wow, Mo. As close as we are, you never shared that story. Thank you.
I don't think I think Ronnie knows that. I don't think I've ever by that story, but that's the state that you get yourself into an overtime goal, and then it was him. Oh God, it was just such a wonderful thing for him.
Because I remember going down, because we didn't have a sideline reporter, and I jumped up as John Forsland was calling the goal, and I bolted to the elevator because I then had to go down for an interview. And I mean, all of a sudden I'm riding down with, I think Peter Chiarelli was their general manager at the time, and Cam Neely. And I mean, I'm trying to be respectful going down there in the cargo elevator.
And not to get beat up.
Yeah, Cam is a nice guy. I would have been willing to go toe to toe. But
that's impressive. Anyway. We do get better when we get older, right, Tip?
Yeah,
that's right.
So I come and I interview Scotty. I didn't know about the diagnosis, and that's what I love about and you can only get it through experience with an interview, because I asked him my first question, and he was incredibly emotional. I think he had tears in his eyes, and he told me about the diagnosis, and somehow I had learned, because I had 3 or 4 questions in my head about boom, 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 where I was going to go next. And I went down a completely different road. Like my first year broadcasting for you in 98, you had Arthur Zerbe, Paul Coffey. And I remember I did a few interviews, and I was so nervous to get through those interviews cleanly. I couldn't hear what the guy said. I just wanted to get to the next question cleanly and get out.
No, that's the way that works. My first game, I mean, I don't think I saw the game. I was looking at my bench card, just getting 5 guys on the ice. I didn't know what was going on, right? That's being a rookie.
I was going to go here later, because being a rookie, because you and I both come from the CompuWare organization. Yeah. We were having dinner a couple of years ago before you were in town in Raleigh playing the Hurricanes. And we got a really cool text. We were having dinner, and it was from Pete Carmanis, and he said, "I'm really proud of both you guys," because we share that he believed in us. Can you please talk about your relationship from stem to stern with Pete?
Yeah, that's one of those things that those guys deserve a call probably once a month from guys like me. Or let me answer this a different way. When you sit down and think about the number of people whose lives he's either changed, made better, impacted, and I know, I mean, that's just in the hockey world. Like his whole business world, all of those people he employed and made their lives better. But I'm such an extreme case of opportunity, right? So that's my story with Mr. Carmanis and with Jim Rutherford at the time. Every time I turned around, I got another opportunity. So the quick story is that I got retired as an overage in major junior, which was a big deal in my life, right? My career had come to an end, and I was given the opportunity to be an assistant coach, and I liked it. Like I felt like it was fun, right? So Tom Webster, the late Tom Webster, who passed away this year, is the head coach. And at the banquet at the end of the year, Mr. Carmanis comes over to me and he says, "How did you enjoy it?" And which seems normal, right? Except that he's the owner of the team, right? I'm an assistant coach of a junior. If he never had to talk to me, like nobody would have thought twice. Anyway, I said, I loved it, Pete. And he turned, I said, I'd like to do it again. And he turned and he said to me, you'll have a job because you want it. And that was in 1989, right? And I worked for them right through to basically 2012. So everything that I have now, all the opportunity that I was given. So I ended up being the head coach of their junior team a few years later. I ended up being head coach and GM of their junior team a year after that, assistant coach in Hartford a year after that, and head coach. Like in 4 years, I think I had 4 different jobs, all because I think Pete and Jimmy are a little bit crazy, right? But they, right from the get-go, what they thought was true, they stuck with. Like if they believe something, right, then hiring a 28-year-old kid to coach a NHL team is insane, and then sticking with them as long as they did is insane. So I have an incredible affinity, but an awareness too of the number of people that you and I know that have come through the CompuWare hockey program. The impact that having a program like that, Andrew Kopp, who's on my team now, the years and years and years of this. So I come through it. Andrew Kopp, now one of my players, 30 years later comes through it. The impact that man has had on people's families and lives can't be overstated.
What makes Pete Karmanos, having been inducted a few years ago, a Hall of Famer?
His people skills isn't the right word. His ability to connect with people, right? So what he would do is when things were really lousy for me or the team, Pete would fly in and then he'd grab me for 10 or 15 minutes. And by the time he walked out of the door, I was energized, relaxed. I'd probably laughed a little bit. He'd have given me at least one shot about something I did that he didn't like, but he had that ability in 15 minutes to make it right in my world. I think that's what great leaders must have to do. When you think of the number of people that worked for him, the size of that corporation, then all his hockey teams, he couldn't spend 7 hours fixing everybody's problems. He'd have to come in, identify the problem, and he could relax me and set me on the right course in about 15 minutes. And he did that at the most perfect times for me. He'd always come in when things were really lousy, talk to me for 15 or 20 minutes, and I'd walk out, ready to dig in. Trip, he would put me back in that mindset of, okay, let's get back to work here. The world's not coming to an end. That's part of what makes him a great leader, I think. The other is Pete kind of exudes this joy of life, and it was manifest in his joy of the game. He got fired up, man. He wanted to win. He loved the game of hockey, but he also seemed to walk around like he loved the game of life, right? Like he had lots of juice, lots of energy for it, and it would just osmosis, right? It would just seep in. So I got all the time. Your podcast isn't nearly long enough to tell you all the things the impact that man's had on my life, and I owe him more Christmas cards, that's for sure. I'll
never forget. Dad, thank you for these last 2 answers, because that was so cool when you and I received that text together. Yeah. Jimmy Rutherford. Let's move on to JR. Within the last couple of years, also inducted in the Hall of Fame. Why is JR a Hall of Famer?
So much of what I just said about Pete is true about Jimmy. But so all of those things I just said are true, but what else? Technical part of his game. So what Jimmy could do is look at his team and know what it needed, but more than just the X's and O's, right? He could feel what the room needed. So perfect small example. We get beat in 2001, and you're there, my friend. We get beat by Buffalo and Washington at home. It's in November, and I got 4 days off before we go to play in Florida. And I'm pretty sure I'm getting fired. Like I'm in real trouble at this point, right? So the running joke, if you call it a joke in the coach's room, is all we got to do is get on that plane. Like we're not sure we're getting on that plane to Florida, right? But in that time, and Jimmy would always be honest with me. Things are testy now, Paul. Things are going to get tight here. That's his way of saying you're almost fired. He trades back for Sean Hill, because we needed what Sean Hill did for our specific team. So Sean Hill walks into the room, makes a joke about why everybody's dragging their chins around. And we go to Florida. we're down 2-0. Jeff O'Neill scores a terrible goal, and we win the game 3-2. We go 7-2-1, and we win the Eastern Conference Championship that year because what he did, he could always feel it. Like even the trade later, after overtime win in Chicago, Shane Willis scores it.
Yeah.
It gets traded, right? And we end up bringing back Weeksy. I don't know. Tom Barrasso might have been in that too. All I know is I got 3 goalies now, and I'm going, what am I doing with this? This is like Arthur Survey, Tom Barrasso, Weeksy. Oh my God, man. But think of how important Kevin Weeks was in that. Like Jimmy knew we needed another tender to help Archie out because I had played Archie about 72 games that year. I didn't like that trade at all. Like I thought, man, we just finally got Willie going here, and then we got rid of him. But Jimmy, and when you look at his Stanley Cup, Dougie Waite to the world, Mark Recchi bringing in, look what he's done in Pittsburgh. That man could feel a room as well as anybody and know what it needed to get to the next level.
How did you, gosh, we could go on. I mean, let's hope I've got a lot of battery life, because I have to ask, the first round of that run that ended here against that Hall of Fame laden Detroit Red Wing team. You play New Jersey, and I think New Jersey, you had home ice because of the Southeast Division, Mo, but I think New Jersey was the best team in the Eastern Conference that you're going to face. And you went Artur Zerbe for 2 home wins, and then you work in Weeksy for the huge Game 5 win, the save on John Madden and Josef Ostacek scoring, and then he closes the door in Game 6. How did you, because you needed both those guys to beat a team the caliber of the Devils, how did you do it? What was it? Give me the thought process.
So I'm going to tie the answer to this one back to your last question, how good Jim Rutherford is. Okay, so we win Game 1 and 2 at home, you're right, and we have no business winning those 2 games. And I remember, I think it was a Kenny Danico quote after saying that they had absolutely no business winning those 2 games, our goalie said, and he was right. So after Game 2, we're heading up to Jersey. Jimmy says, you should put Weeksy in the net. And I said, like, are you crazy? Like, I'm thinking you're crazy. He goes, you should put Weeksy in the net. You're going to have a tough time. Game 3. You can always come back with Archie, but this is, I think that was his comment. This might be the best team in the league. And we kind of stole 2 games. But no, I'm not putting Weeksy in the net. I got Archie just stood on his head for 2. The players look at me like I got 3 horns, right? So we get beat. I pull Archie in Game 3, right? Because we're getting smoked. So after Game 3, he says, you should put Weeksy in the net. I'm going, I can't do that. Like, I just pulled him. He's fresh, right? He's ready to go. So I put him in Game 4, and we get shellacked. And now he's not talking. Jimmy's not talking to me anymore. He's said his piece twice, man. The third time is, you're out of here. So I put Weeksy in Game 5.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure my coaching career, my entire career now is riding on Weeksy. And I'm standing on the bench, Trip, stepping down, because I've seen John Madden, the puck on John Madden's stick, and it's over, man. We've lost this game, right? And then the crowd goes berserk. We score in overtime. So that's the Weeksy story. Like, Jimmy was telling me to put him in 2 games earlier. I'm so stubborn sometimes that, no, that's crazy. But he was right. He was right. We won the series, won a conference championship on that call. Yeah.
One clarification, Jimmy would say, Paul, I think you should put Weeksy in. So, hey,
that's pretty good. Let
me paint a picture of Jimmy. All managers are different in their style. He is the definition in Webster's dictionary of intense. And so when you get on the bus, all right, after Jimmy sits on the door side, right there, and the coach sits right across the way. And if we've lost, now I ride on a media bus, but not in those days. If we've lost, you can cut the tension with a knife. So what are those rides like to the airport? What were they? Because Jimmy happens to be not only your general manager, but one of your dearest friends in the world. I need you to pull out the canvas and paint a Louvre type picture.
Okay, so there's 3 events that are going to happen. First of all, like, we're both grinding our teeth. Like, there's a similarity to our personalities, that there would be kind of like a no man's land on the bus. We weren't I certainly wasn't going to say anything to him because I didn't know where he was at. So one of three things happens. We don't say a word to each other the entire night. That happened most times after losses. The next morning, we'd have a conversation if he had something he wanted to say. If he was really, really steamed, in Montreal, I put Brian Rodney in the shootout. I don't know if you remember that one. We lost in a shootout because Brian Rodney was just called up from the American Hockey League, like playing in his first or second game, but he had gone like 7 for 10, right?
Yes.
And
I think I backed you on the air.
Right. And well, you and I were both in trouble then. And I didn't put Brandon Sutter in, who had scored, I think, 2 goals that game, except Brandon. And I talked to him on the ice like a week earlier, how about shootouts? And he goes, no, I hate those things. I'm terrible at them. Like he didn't want to. But anyway, in that event where he just couldn't take it anymore, he'd tell you directly as possible, right? He'd just give it to you. But straight, clean, it wouldn't be a 20-minute undressing. He'd just say, I have no idea. I'll never understand that. That's whatever. Be some language involved. And then it would be done, right? He wasn't coming back to you an hour later. He was giving it to you straight there. Yeah. And then the last one is, and this was true, like on the ugly, ugly nights. He'd say something about, well, that wasn't very good. And I could tell by his tone, he wanted to talk about the game, but he wasn't looking for a fight, right? So, I mean, I got a million stories about Jimmy, and there would be no other person in my life that's been a bigger mentor. But what's really cool about that is it's true today. So I left Carolina in 2012. He goes on to Pittsburgh. I go to Russia. So, I mean, we talk 3 or 4 times a year when we get a chance, right? It's life in the NHL. But the stuff that he told me 25 years ago, I'm still using today, or better yet, I'm finally using, right? Like he told me 25 years ago to do this. It took me that long to figure out, but I'll tell you a quick story. It won't be funny to you, but it's so important. I'm in trouble early on, as I always was, right? We're not winning, and we go into New Jersey, and I am distraught, and he knows it. So before the game, we're sitting up in the stands, and I'm about as low as you can get. And out comes the New Jersey Devil mascot in his gear, and he's ripping around the ice with nobody, and he's putting on his show. Well, by the end of that, I'm in tears laughing, Jimmy's in tears laughing, and it just broke all of the tension that I felt like. I felt like I was letting him down. And at the end of it, it was kind of like, you know what, if you laughed a little more, you might enjoy this a little bit. You got to relax. It's just the game. So that's your GM telling a rookie young coach to relax a little bit. That had a big impact on me, right? I carried that with me for a long time. Like it really, really helped. And that Jimmy is one of the smartest persons I've ever met in my life. He can feel a room. He can feel your tension. He's very caring. But as you said, like hyper competitive too, right? So there's a lot of engine there when you're not playing well. He's driving.
And I tell you, I'll try to land the plane quickly. I mean, first of all, Jimmy had so much to do with me growing as a broadcaster because the lockout that, we lost 2004, 2005, he said to me, I want you to do 2 things. I want you to get in touch with John Shannon, longtime producer for Hockey Night in Canada. And at one point, NHL should have never let him leave this post, the head of NHL broadcasting, and the great Harry Neal. And those 2 guys became mentors to me. Yeah. So Jimmy, I'll never forget that. I'll always be grateful for it. Now, 2 quick stories. When Jimmy usually he always goes on the road. Some managers are scouting, some are staying at home. He usually always goes on the road. So one particular trip he doesn't go on, the Canes, I play in Dallas, all right? And Andrew Raycroft, who I believe you coached in Toronto, and so anyway, I'm looking at my shooting chart. I mean, the percentages didn't lie, and he was weak, at least according to the numbers, high glove. So I said
you
early
didn't say
in the
it.
game,
You said it?
I said it early in the game, and I probably had Dave Letterman repetition. I came back to it probably too many times in the game. And then in overtime, David Tanabe, I think, had a chance, and he's going high glove, and I'm like, come on, score. Yeah. And I mean, just an absolute glove save and a beauty. Okay. Yeah. I think we lost. So we get to Florida, and Jimmy now joins us on the road. Jimmy goes, he comes up to me and he goes, I watched the Dallas game, I'm going to give you a grade. And I'm like, okay, my heart rate's starting to go up. And he goes, G. I said, G? I looked at him, I said, G? Is that worse than an F, Jimmy? And he goes, G. G for, I won't say, G for bleep goaltending. All you do is talk about goaltending. And so now I'm totally hot and bothered, all right? And I think I went, Corey Stillman, was playing for Florida at the time, and I think I went to his house because I had stayed there the night before to stay because his kids are like, nephews and his daughter and niece to me. And I'm all totally rattled. But to this day, all these years later, I write goaltending at the top of my game sheet just to make sure, because it's the position I'm most comfortable talking about. The other one was, and this is a classic, Mo.
So just so we're clear, you cost them the game, just so you're clear about that. Just so when he's sitting there watching that happen, he knows a glove save's coming, it's costing, and it's your fault, my friend. It's like saying shutout with 5 minutes left, right? You just can't do that.
I'm gonna have to ask him if he threw his remote control at the screen.
Oh, 5 times, guaranteed.
And so the other one, this is comical. All right, so this is the year Sochi, so we had a break. Canes are struggling. And we started a road trip in Buffalo, pummeled, Dallas, pummeled, go to that great hotel in Santa Monica, the Lowe's Hotel. So I know it's going to be a tough practice, and I go for a run on the beach, feeling good about myself. It's probably 7:45 in the morning, but to make the bus, I've got to rush, okay? And it takes this frame some time after I'm, working the heart rate to cool down. I don't quite sweat like Weeksy, but it takes me some time to cool down. So I then stupidly in the lobby, just for fun, go grab a cup of coffee. And I'm talking to Rod Brindamore and Chuck Caden. Okay. I'm fine. I'm a little warm, but my body temp's okay. Jimmy comes up. He hasn't been on the road trip. Okay. He comes up and he's fumed, and he goes, Trip, and right in front of Rod and Chuck, he goes, I watched the Buffalo game. Semin, you keep talking about that he's dusting it off too much. I don't know what you're talking about. If I don't know what you're talking about, or as long as I've been in the game, nobody else is going to know what you're talking about. And now, it's like a cascade coming down my face. I can see Chuck and Rod looking at me. Yeah, that was what a scene in the lobby. And, I learned, but he always let me do my job. I get 1 or 2 of those a year max.
Yeah, that, you know what I mean? Like that's what his strength is, but you never really left the meeting with Jimmy wondering what he was thinking, right? Like if you left that meeting and you weren't sure what he was thinking, it's about you. You're the one with the problem, and you better find out what's wrong soon, right? Because he was really, he had just such an unusual way of getting his point across where it was pretty clear. And if you didn't know, I think sometimes if you didn't know, that was on purpose, so you'd have to come back and ask him, right? It's almost that you would start the conversation, and he's got a managerial gift that, and I'm going to say gift, like that not a lot of people have, that it's like a talent, right? He can feel a room, he can keep half the room on its toes and half the room laughing and take pressure off. I can't say half the room because that'd be 3 halves, but he can do what he needs to do with each segment of the room all at the same time. It's a really unusual thing to watch. It's impressive.
The Hall of Fame gift. You were talking about the shootout, Rodney, not Sutter, in Montreal. I just dug in with Kevin Weeks, our mutual dear friend, a couple of days ago. And with everything going on in the world, and Weeksy and I had a very powerful, amazing digging in episode. And he spoke about when there was the issue with I believe the banana peel in Montreal several years ago. You were his coach. Yep. And your reaction, he will never forget it, and how much it meant to him. He talked about your players as well, but he spoke specifically about you. What do you remember about that? Because it's certainly something he'll never forget.
Yeah, I remember the emotion of it, right? So you're talking about a guy that like Weeksy's got this brilliant personality, right? Like he's a funny, incredibly articulate, interesting guy. So he could have the two of you guys throw a podcast together and watch out, right? There's not enough time on the clock. So, so you end up, those kind of guys you're drawn to and you care about. And then from my point of view, the guy like saved my job a week earlier, right? So he's just come off the Madden save. So, I mean, and then something like that happens in Montreal. It's not the Montreal Canadian players, right? It's sheer stupidity and ignorance. But it's directed at one of your players, so there's obviously some anger that goes with it. But the bigger the trip is like, what do you do? Like, how do you handle that as a coach? So and Jim Rutherford's involved in this too, right? Because everybody's aware of it. And the solution was, ask Kevin. Ask Kevin what he needs from us. And we're going to do exactly what he wants. It's his situation. So being the team guy, and that's what team sports is, he doesn't want, and when we're in the second round of the playoffs and we're in Montreal. So this isn't going to get brushed under, right? It's going to be a major issue. And he handles it. He doesn't want the coach or the GM making a huge statement. He wants to let it go so we can focus on hockey. And that's what we do. But then you're wondering, like, is that the right? I mean, it's the right thing for Kevin, but is it the right thing to do? And certainly in today's climate, you're wondering, did we do the right thing with him? But at the end of the day, Kevin Weeks is a man first, and he has the right to handle the situation. And our job is to support him. And he turned out to be right for him and for us, because he continued on, the team continued on. And the Montreal Canadian players aren't involved in that. So he almost protects the whole league, right? In the way he wanted it dealt with. I just remember thinking what strength. Also maybe my first time on awareness that things aren't equal for all people, right? That you're going, why would you do that to Kevin Weeks? He's one of the greatest guys you're going to meet, right? You don't get it. You don't understand it. But we learned a lesson from Kevin. And he went on. The team went on. The Montreal Canadiens went on, and it was a powerful event.
It was. Still thinking about Nicky Vollin's goal to turn that series. The great Nicky Vollin, and that wasn't his only overtime. We had one against Toronto, and you beat him in the conference finals.
Nick Vollin and Marty Jelena, right?
Yeah.
The Dragon Slayers.
Dragon Slayers. Oh yeah. And Nicky Vollin, the way he could balance a chair, bananas. I don't even want to get into what he did to bless Tim Gleason's stick in the New Jersey series.
No, you don't, but it worked.
Yeah,
but you don't, because that'd be the end of your podcast. But we're good.
Well, they are brothers from another mother. But in the finals, right down the road, Kenny Holland, the great Red Wing and now Oiler general manager, said that series could have gone either way. It's pre-salary cap. Ronnie Francis gets the overtime winner in game one. What I want to ask you is, because he's a previous dig-in guest, the legendary Scotty Bowman, who it's been a thrill to pick his brain over the years. Yeah. What was that like? Because he's got quite a stare. Yeah. It's quite a bust. Yeah. I mean, like whether you were at home with Last Change or on the road in Joe Louis, what was it like when you're staring him down? Because that's a classic situation.
Yeah, I was like 17 at the time. I'm not staring Scotty Bowman down at any point in that. I know that all coaches have a style, right? So you can pick it up. We watch a couple of games. You got a feel for how he runs his bench, and you can almost anticipate what's coming next, right? So part of the process in preparing for Detroit was trying to figure out what he was doing with his bench, because now I think when all things are said and done and Pavel Datsuk's career is officially over, I think there's 9 Hall of Fame players on that team plus Scotty Bowman. There might be 10, so they weren't bad. I get that, but he was the hardest guy to figure out what he was doing on his bench. So I charted every line change for 10 games for his playoffs. So I kind of thought I had a handle on what I was doing. So what happens is 3 years later, I'm fired, and he's over in Austria at the World Championships, and he's going to speak. So I go over there, and that's one of the main reasons I want to hear this guy speak, right? This is before, and he's retired. So I'm thinking he's going to give us some good stuff. And he gets up there, and it was brilliant, right? And the question and answer period after was great. Somebody asked him about that, and he said, you know what? I pretty much just tried to figure out what the other coach wanted and then wouldn't give it to him. And I'm going, that's what it was. You know, like I that's what I thought he was doing, because it really didn't matter. I mean, it's going to be Fedorov, it's going to be Yzerman, it's going to be Draper, and then Datsuk or wherever else. Like, it's going to be somebody great. But that's what he was doing. That's the way he worked his bench. But the biggest compliment, I think, about Scotty came actually from Ron Francis, and that's when Pittsburgh won the Stanley Cup when he was there. He felt that Scotty Bowman got every match, every night, in every game that he wanted, like for 2 straight months. That his mind worked so well. He could figure out, it wasn't always the same match, but he could figure out who was going on his bench and who was going on the other bench matchup. That he was just brilliant at that, and he was. So I mattered as much to us, Trip, because we were, you know, I mean, they're starting 6 players in game 1. Their payroll was bigger than our whole hockey teams. So it was more about fresh legs. So I had Brindamore and Francis as that kind of shutdown. You know, one of those 2 was playing against Yzerman or Fedorov. And then, God bless him, I had the late Nicky Joseph Wasicek at center ice. And then, you know, it was like Westland, Adams, and Westland was my 4th lines. And those guys, you know, they got a TV timeout shift every once in a while, but they didn't play very much hockey. So it was almost keeping your shift short enough. But it was tight, you know. I mean, you lose a game in triple overtime. I think that broke us. I don't think we had anything left after that game. But up until that point, I agree, it was a tight series.
Well, I mean, I just look at the end of what was Jeff O'Neill scored. I want to say 11, 12, 13 minutes left to give the Hurricanes the lead in game 3, 1-1 in the series. And you guys played, I'll say in the case of this, we played very well with the lead. And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, we're not giving up a ton of chances. And I want to say, you speak of all those Hall of Famers in that payroll, down a goal late in regulation. Yzerman wins the draw. Fedorov is on the point, goes to Lidstrom, Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame. And then Lidstrom gets it just by the first guy in Brett Hall, Hall of Fame, tips it home. So you win that game in regulation, and you were not hanging on for dear life. That's a totally different series, even when you look at the 2 rosters. You know, that's it's a bunch of Hall of Fame players delivering the goods there in the dying, you know, maybe just a minute left or under a minute left in regulation in game 3.
Well, I haven't thought about that every day for the last 18 years, but I agree with you, right? It's something that you think about. Well, Brett Hull drag bunts that across his body, right? Nearly impossible to do, back into the net, and then you lose it in triple overtime. That's the reminder. I look at that event as a positive now. So we started here in Winnipeg, and certainly in Carolina, but we started here in Winnipeg with some really, really young teams. We're just starting to come out of that now. But they were way better than we were in terms of depth of personnel. I mean, look, it's one of the best teams that's ever been on the ice together, right? Half their team's in the Hall of Fame, and we were right there. So that's a reminder always that if you play as a group and you play with passion and you compete and you dig in, you got a chance to win the Stanley Cup. So that's what drives us kind of every day. You don't really look at your roster and say, okay, these are all the pieces that we don't have that are going to keep us from winning the Stanley Cup. You look at that roster and say, if we get to the right place, if we get ourselves mentally and physically to the right place, we can play with any team in the league and any team in the history of the league. We don't have to beat them 82 times, right? You only got to beat them 4 times. So you got a chance to win. That's what I'm left with now. That was a heart and soul kind of team. You know, 3 kids, Marty Gellin and 2 kids was your entire third line, but they got fire. And if your hockey team does that, you can win.
I want to ask you, because I want to get on to Toronto and you know how much I'm not even a closet. I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan. So, but I just one more Hurricanes question, because you're just talking about, you know, just running and going and seeing Scotty Bowman speak in Austria after the 2002 finals, and that Ronnie Francis talked about that he seemed to always win those matchup battles. I want to dig in on what I saw as your analyst in 2009 in that terrific series against the Boston Bruins, Zdeno Chara in his prime. And, Claude Julien, tell me if I'm wrong, in terms of coaches that are heavy matchers, he's a heavy matcher. And with last change in Boston games 1 and 2, I mean, I don't know if Eric had any shifts not against Chara.
Right.
And either in game 3 or game 4, long second period change. I want to say Dougie Huda was running the Bruin blue line.
Yeah.
And I thought you changed the whole series with last change, and you had to be creative because Eric Stahl, Cole might have been on the ice too, had a shift when Chara wasn't on the arena was bumping. I thought it changed the whole series.
Yeah.
And then I remember, this is a rarity, the fitness fanatic that Chara is. In overtime of game 7, you could see he was visibly exhausted. I thought with last change, that key matchup, you in a lot of ways, players got to do the work, but you won the series. Can you walk me through that? Because Claude Julien is a great bench boss with matchups, and that changed everything.
Well, that's clearly their matchup, and it's an important one for them because, Eric Stahl is driving our bus at that point. He's the big dog. So it's clear that that's what they're wanting. And you know what? As much about game tactics, you also, like Eric would want to play against Chara, right? Those guys want to go against the best. But you also have to be able to shake them loose every once in a while. So, I mean, especially if they're not winning that match, like a guy like Eric wants to score, that he wants to put pucks in the net. So we're running a tough series. And all I'm looking for, especially in the second period, is 1 or 2 shifts. That's all you need during a period when you get them out and get them loose. So it went from, I believe, an offensive zone face-off on a short play. So he would have been, and I'm just kind of assuming this part, but I know exactly the play that you're talking about. But it was about 23 to 25 seconds long, and I took him off. And what happened was the play developed again, and we were running shorter shifts than everybody else, and I came back with him. So when I took him off, the big dog, and now in the second period, they can't get him back on in flow because the puck never came all the way back to our end of the ice. It came in transition, and Eric came off the bench, and we went in and scored a big goal. And sometimes something will be, we're winning this game because of it, right? We got our break, we got our chance. That was a really emotional series. It was, I think that was important up until kind of game 4, game 5, when then you're right, fatigue sets in on both teams. Then the Scotty Walker kind of story took over, and that's where the energy level came up for us. And it was just a knuckler to the net. And again, Scotty came right off the bench on that play, right? We're running shorter shifts than they are. So Scotty came off wobbling down the middle of the ice. The rebound came right up the pipe, and he scored. So those matchups are critical, especially if you have an advantage, right? But at the end of the day, we all go onto the bench as coaches with a plan. But that part of that plan is how your team's going to play and how their team's going to play. And it's different almost every single night. So you need to make those adjustments as you go.
Thought it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I've always wanted to dig in with you about it because this is not your friend speaking. This is your analyst, because I can still see where I was in Raleigh when that happened at home. And I thought it was marvelous. We're not going to take an intermission. We're just going to support one of our sponsors, a presenting sponsor, Panerai. Panerai, Mo, you hang on before I get Panerai Elite, Italian design, Swiss made. Do you wear timepiece? Are you familiar with Panerai?
Yeah, so I love them. As a matter of fact, if I owned a watch, it would be that. But I don't wear a watch. I don't wear a watch as a reminder. And not a lot of people know this, but I don't wear a watch as a reminder that you don't have as much time as you think on this earth. So you got to make. I had one. I left it at a coffee shop when I was writing out a bunch of hockey notes, and I was reading a bunch of newspapers, and I walked away without it on, and I haven't put one on. But if I did, Trip, I'd wear one just like the one you're wearing right now. I don't know what you got on there, but that's pretty sweet. Look at that.
Well, it's actually, they have this, they have submersibles, they have luminors, they have some incredible new technology that's, that they've improved their material, blue tints. But this is called the scientist. Okay, so I mean, I've always thought
That's
that
right up your alley, my friend. Right up your alley.
You are the scientist of bench bosses, and
Yeah.
it's great to hear that you think that I think hands down, Panerai is the coolest on the planet. And should you ever go in the timepiece direction, Panerai.
I'm calling you, my friend. And now they've got phenomenal dive watches. So you know my son Jake. So my son Jake wants to take up diving a few years back, and I went with him, right, just to get my. And now he's gone on and he's been diving in the Philippines and all over the place. But that's like that. The reason that I liked it because they had cool dive watches. So that's as much as diving wasn't for me, but the really cool gear that comes with it. They've got some spectacular dive watches that I've looked at, but I don't dive much anymore. So
this submersible collection is exactly what you're talking about. You can change the bands, different colors depending on what suits your fancy. So the great people at Panerai.com. Okay, let's move on. I want to ask you about Toronto. A couple of questions. Being the head coach of such a storied franchise, Pete DeBoer, one of your dearest friends, comes out of the Windsor Spitfire organization. We dug in with him last week, and I asked him about changing with the times, and I complimented you. I've always thought of you as a player's coach, Mo, but over the course of time, and I've always thought that the pendulum really swung with Matt Sundin and company with the Leafs, that you are a premier player's coach. First of all, how do you define player's coach? Is that an accurate statement on my part?
I don't know. I'm going to say for some players, I'm player coach. I think it's taking evolution now than it did before. These guys are different than they used to be. But one of the advantages of coming in as young as I did, I couldn't have any BS in my game. I'm dealing with players that are older than me. I'm dealing with a bunch of guys who've earned their way to the NHL. And if it wasn't for Pete Kermanis and Jim Rutherford, I mean, it would have been another 10 years before I got to the NHL. So my trick, if you will, in handling people is I learned to be really honest with them very, very quickly. Because if you get out into this kind of BS area, these guys will call you on it, especially when I started, right? Like you're a good friend of both of ours, Tom Barrasso. He's not letting you get away with a bunch of BS if you're talking about his game, right? He's calling you on that right away. So in my first year or two in the league, all of my interactions went in that direction, that you just tell them the truth as fast as you can. And then whatever conversation happens off of that, at least you started. So the vast majority of people like that. And players like that, to be dealt with. It's not always kind or it's certainly not always soft if you're having a very honest conversation about where you think your game at, but they never walk away wondering what you were thinking. And I've found that the higher the level of player I dealt with, they appreciated that honesty because they usually didn't get it. And the fourth line kind of guys loved it because they needed it to survive, right? They need to play the next year. They need to know exactly what the coach is talking about, so they have a chance. So I am a player's coach in that, but not in the kind of whatever you guys want to do today is fine, right? Like I'm not going to defer my job to them so that they are really, really happy playing for me, which is more of a challenge now, right? These younger players have come in, and what's different is they get this gratification of how great they are at 22 and 23, a contract that these guys didn't get until they were, 28, 29, and they really don't need any. They don't need the hard conversation anymore because they've got 10 people telling them they're the greatest. So there's some changing of how you approach people possibly, but at the end of the day, I would be considered a player's coach because it didn't take them too long to figure out what I was saying. Unlike this answer, I'm usually very direct.
Okay, because I define a player's coach as you always know where you stand, and I want to ask you about Matt Sundin in a minute, but I have to, after what you just said, I have to read you a statement that I got via text today from your at one time Winnipeg Jet captain, Andrew Ladd, and he said Mo had a great saying that the guys on the other side are getting paid too. He said, I always love this saying. He said, his command of the room was the best I've ever seen. He'd have you ready to run through a wall for him. And now, in terms of, being a player's coach, Mo, but not letting him get away with anything, this is a neat story from Andrew. We had a string of guys being late when he first got to Winnipeg. So he warned us, if one guy is late again, everybody would be punished together. Sure as shit, someone is late again. I was hurt at the time, and he calls me, and he says it would be great to have our captain on the ice tomorrow. Worst bag skate I've ever been a part of, but he was clear from the get-go of what he expected from everyone after that. It was an upper body injury. There were only 2 games left in the season.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But that, to me, is a player's coach.
Yeah. So I bet you I had 3 guys late in a span of about 13, 14 years, right? And the old punishment used to be they had to buy the team lunch, which used to be funny because the teams didn't provide lunch in those days. So what the guys would do is they go down to 5 guys or whatever, and they would load up on burger fries, and that would be their way of fine. You're going to make me buy lunch. I'm buying what I want. And the players loved it. It was great. Now the team's all surprise meals, so I got nothing left to do. And I come back from Russia. The guys are late all the time. Like I got more guys late in the first 3 weeks, so I don't know what's going on here. I'm trying to fix it. But even that, so that one I told him, I said, look, I'm done with you. I don't know what else. I don't want to put a guy in the stands. I eventually did. I eventually put a player on Saturday night hockey night in Canada, and it still didn't fix it. So here's what fixed it. If you're late now for the Winnipeg Jets, you got to do community service. And we've got lots of places, shelters here in town that our team's organized with. And that's the one thing that seems to work. Now, if you go, you skate everybody, they're all together for an hour, you sit a guy out, he can complain, but nothing really happens. But you take 3 or 4 hours out of his next weekend because he's got to go down to work at a shelter, that one's worked pretty good.
That's a good one. Why is Winnipeg such a great fit for you and such a special place? Because I dig Winnipeg.
Yeah, it's how you grow up, Trip. It's how you live, right? I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, so that was home. My wife's from just outside of Windsor, Ontario. So Winnipeg is a big Sault Ste. Marie / Windsor. But part of this is true how you grew up. So I get fired the 3rd time. So my second time from Carolina, my 3rd time, and we're driving home and it's Christmas, right? So this is right after the time, you and I talked, I think, Ottawa, after the Ottawa game. So I'm driving home and we're driving through Ohio and it's snowing and it's around Christmas and everybody's got their lights on. And I turn to my wife and say, this is maybe one of my regrets, that my kids hadn't grown up the way I did, like in the snow at Christmas. My kids weren't going to learn how to drive in the snow. All those things that, get a little nostalgic for your home. And then, God, I don't know, 5 years later, I'm coaching the Winnipeg Jets. My kids all turned 16 and the back ends come out on the flying down the road, right? This is it's the way I grew up, and it's the way I wanted my kids that opportunity to grow. So my 3 kids get up here, and at the end of the day, Trip, it's all about your kids. They get up here and they just take off, right? So my 2 boys go to an all-guys school named St. Paul's, and just now they got lifelong friends and they're good people, and it's been great. My daughter went to St. Mary's, made instant friends on teams. So she's in education. My son Jake wants to be a broadcaster, a play-by-play guy. So Winnipeg's been unbelievable for my 3 kids, and it's the way I grew up. So I feel connected to this town. It's also, as you know, about 2 hours east of here is one of the finest fisheries in the world. So if you like to fish, Lake of the Woods is the place to be. So this is as close to heaven as I'm getting, possibly ever. Yeah.
I think you're on a good journey from the heavenly cloudy standpoint, but I want to dig in more to the Jets and what they mean, because I feel like such a moron to start the story this way, but several years ago, we're in Winnipeg, right near the end of the pregame show. And, we're on camera, going on camera in like 10 seconds. Some guy knocks on the door in the TV booth. He pokes his head in, and like the stage manager says, this guy wants to talk to you. And this is the moron part of me. I looked at his face. I didn't know who he was. But I'd like to think I'm a good guy. So I'm like, well, we're going on in 10 seconds. So, okay. And he said, hey, Trip, Mark Chipman. I just want to, and he said some really nice things about our broadcast. Okay. This is your chairman. This is one of the most highly thought of guys in the game. He has since become a dear friend. When my brother was accused of espionage and in prison in Venezuela, he reached out to Larry Tannenbaum because he had business dealings in Venezuela to try to get my brother out. Mark Chipman is, let's grab the salt shaker. He is salt of the earth. And I think wow, what a guy to represent your brand with the Winnipeg Jets.
You know what? So I feel this very, very strongly. And I didn't until I got a little bit older. But coaching in the National Hockey League may not be the most socially redeeming thing I could have done with my life, right? So there's it's a capitalist environment. You're chewing on guys' butts, and you're pushing buttons, and it's win lose. So at the end of the day, as we talked about heaven, when I meet my God, he's not going to say, hey, I'm a big Jets fan, go on in, right? So my best chance from a professional point of view getting a passing grade comes from working here and working for a guy like Mark Chipman. He's been lucky. But with Mr. Kermanis and Mr. Tannenbaum, they do an awful lot of good for people. But I didn't realize how important that was till you get to a certain age where your eyes open up and you realize, like, this guy owns the team for all of the right reasons. It's not for autographs. It's not to make a ton of money. It's certainly not to get on the camera, because you're going to have a hard time finding him on the camera. It's for what it does for the city of Winnipeg. We are unique here in Winnipeg. So this is not a 5 million person market. It's a small market. And this is what people do. Old winters up here, but I can tell you, because two of my kids have worked at a program he's got called Camp Manitou, with the work that he does for at-risk kids, and these are significantly at-risk kids, and the commitment that he makes to them, and the brilliant place it is for my kids to work there with the people that he has working there. This guy, this guy makes my job socially redeemable, I think. Being a head coach in the NHL is okay if you work for Mark Chipman, because he does so much good for this community. And he is such a fine example of what very successful men should be in terms of how they live their life and how they try to help people. I pale in comparison to that, but certainly have enjoyed very much getting to know him and watching the impact that he's had. And the never-ending question for him is, how can I do more? How can I do more? And so it's been... That goes back, and probably should have been my first answer about why I love Winnipeg. But working for Mark Chipman in Winnipeg is the best I could do in pro sports, I think.
I'm proud to call him a friend. I'm so happy he poked his head in that broadcast booth, whatever, sea door. We just spoke about having a Winnipeg Jet legend just entered heaven a few weeks ago. Dale Hawerchuk, Mo, what can you tell me about your experiences with him? I'd have to think, were you guys in the OHL as players at the same? Tell me about your entire history with Dale.
Yeah, so he's he would be about 57, so he's older than I am. I passed through after he came through. So when he comes to greatness, I'm still just a kid in Canada, right? Like this rookie up Winnipeg. And then nothing, right? So he is just kind of getting to the back half of his career toward the end of it when I'm coming into the league. So we didn't cross paths here. But where we did is Mark Scheifele played for him in Barrie. So Mark's, the cornerstone guys here. And we also have these things. So there would be two interfaces. One is we have a development camp every year and we bring coaches in. So one year Dale came in. So it's a big deal for me, right? Like, you got to know that Gretzky was in Edmonton and Hawerchuk was in Winnipeg. When you're a Canadian kid growing up, these are your big names, right? So I get to roll in and hang out with Dale Hawerchuk. That's pretty cool for me. But what's really cool is 5 minutes in, there's a rink board on the table, and he's talking hockey, right? And this guy's working at the game. He's asking questions. He's sharing stuff. And so he leaves, and you go, okay, that's why. And you see it with Roddy Brindamore. There are great players that have such a love of the game. They want to keep loving it, but they want to keep learning. They want to learn about it from a different angle. Some guys, great players, they just want to hang out in the locker room. Dale wanted to get good at it. He wanted to work at it. And, we had a private moment because there are times there that I was transitioning assistant coaches. One was going to the Moose. I had a hole. Is you ever interested in leaving? And he said, no, I don't want to leave Barrie. I mean, he goes, I have too big an impact on these kids, and I love it. My family loves it. So he was definitely connected to that. And then the other was our heritage game, our outdoor game here in Winnipeg against Edmonton. To see, and I hope it's this way now, Triple. But the Oilers are there, so I got Charlie Huddy on my staff, and Wayne Gretzky's there, and all these Oilers are there, and all of these old Jets are there. How much fun it was for them, right? Like that, they enjoyed the game, and I think they had friendships in a different manner, possibly than the way these guys do now, because it was just their room, right? There weren't 50 relationships. There weren't 6 guys leaving every year and coming back, where almost the league is just a pool of players now. These guys love each other, right? And they tell some phenomenal stories. So I got to see Dale then in his environment and the respect that those players had for him, the stories they told about him. Those were my 2 interactions. And what you're left with is that's a guy that figured out a way to love the game of hockey and all parts of it and enjoy it. So he had a way too short life, but certainly in the game, a really, really full life.
I don't know if I told you this story. I met him, and I'll never forget it. I've gone to one draft. Even when I got drafted in the 9th round, what a pick by Philly. Yeah. My dad told me after a high school graduation party. Yeah.
You were drafted by Philly? So was I, my friend.
Well, for the love of God, you were my head coach my one game in the NHL. You should know that.
Well, no, we weren't in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
We weren't in Philly. I didn't know you were Philly.
Yeah.
So were you a free agent signing or a trade coming over?
No.
Don't be offended. I can't believe I've heard.
Listen, Bobby Clark. Okay, first of all, I knew I was in trouble because my best year in college was my freshman year. Won the Beanpot. So my dad comes into my bedroom after I go to my buddy Nick Giorgio's high school graduation party and goes, "I've got some good news and I've got some bad news." I said, "Well, give me the bad news first." My backup, my freshman year, Aaron Israel, went to Philly in the 7th round. And I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He said, "Well, you went to Philly in the 9th round."
Wow.
And I mean, you look at it, like a couple picks later, Pavel Dimitra, God rest his soul, Mike Greer, I mean, gosh. And Russ Farwell was the GM. Then he gets canned a couple weeks later. So then I'm rooming with Jason Karmanis at Harvard and, finished senior year. And through my dad and also Pete, the great Ricky Curran becomes my agent. And he calls me one day. In my dorm room at Harvard. He goes, "Yeah, I'm going to talk to Clarkie, and we'll start ironing out some numbers." And and I'm like, okay, this is great. And I mean, I'm feeling good. Calls me back. Rick does a couple days later, and he goes, "Yeah, I talked to Clarkie. He said, tell the kid he's got a good college degree, get on with his life."
And the honest, there's direct and honest for you.
Yeah. So then I called Pete, and Pete said, let me talk to Jimmy. And then I was able to come into camp, without a contract, and and then go see our dear friend Kevin Cato McCarthy in Springfield, and then that's how I got the contract. But no, Philadelphia, the great line: "Tell the kid he's got a good college degree, get on with his life." So anyway, my first draft, I went with some Hurricane supporters down to Dallas a few years ago. So I didn't even know how the draft works, Mo. You're a head coach, you're on the draft floor. This, as Kevin Weeks would call it, the C-suite level, the corporate suites. Every team's got a suite. So I'm having a ball. I'm up in our suite, and we take talk about the most special of kids and players. You saw him pull off one of his lacrosse goals, Andrei Svechnikov, who played for Dale, Howard, Chuck, and Barry.
Yeah.
And so I'm in our corporate suite. In comes Svech. All right, I meet him for the first time. His brother, Evgeny, who's a Red Wing, first-round pick. So I'm in there having a few beers and with Svech's agents, great guys, big fans of yours, Mark Gandler, Todd Diamond. And Howard Chuck comes in with the owner of Barry. And what a nice, bigger guy. And so we're telling stories. And I'm like, Dale Howard Chuck is like we have been buddies for years. Roddy Brindamore's in there.
Yeah.
So then somehow it filters its way down the hall. And now I'm in a circle because I ran into Rick Tocchet, and Rick and I had sat at a table with one of your old players, Gary Roberts, at Mark Recchi's wedding. All right. So Tock and I really hit it off. So I think it's Tock, Johnny McLean, Roddy, Howard Chuck. I don't know if Eiserman's, all like Hall of Fame players and me.
Yeah.
and they're telling, and I'm telling Stu, Tock is asking me stories, like what's going on, who you dating, that type of thing. And all of a sudden I'm telling this story, and they're engaged. And Dale Howard Chuck, this is awesome. The old boys, they get a tap on the shoulder. Trip, Wayne Gretzky, don't want to interrupt, just wanted to say good to see you. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, Are you kidding? Inside, I'm like, are you kidding me? The great one? On top of the fact he felt the need to introduce himself. Yeah. So that was my night with Dale Howard Chuck. God rest
That's
his
one
soul.
of those days, Trip, they almost should just walk out of the building and go home, right? Because it's not getting a whole lot better than that.
I should have waltzed right out.
I'm at Flyers training camp in, 85, 86. And Bobby Orr is running the practice. So I get out on the ice and Bobby Orr is on the ice like this. So Eddie Van Impe is on the ice. Bobby Orr's on the ice. And partway through it, we're the whistle blow. We're going for the next drill. And I'm kind of waiting for Bobby Orr to come over and tell us what the next drill is, except he's standing over on the boards talking to Gordie Howe, right? I should have just skated off the ice right then because my career wasn't getting any better. That was the peak of my career. Those guys being on the ice or around the ice with Bobby Orr and Gordie Howe, time to go. Should have left. Just stuck around too long.
Let me tell you a story. So because of he represented, among others, still does to this day, the guys that are still playing, Eric Stahl, Cam Ward, okay, among others, I'd have to think about saying that Boston series, and of course, one of the most iconic of Boston Bruins. And so he was so inspired by your team in that 2009 second round. He called, I still have the voicemail saved to this day. He said, Tripper, Bobby Orr, boy, the boys compete. I think he said dug in. He said, boy, the boys competed last night. They dug in. They competed. And then he threw a shot at me, I'm sure they won because of you. So then he said, Tripper, I'm going to play golf, but I want to talk to them. Boy, the boys, it's inspiring. They dug in. Boy, what a competitive bunch. And he calls me probably 30 minutes later, and he goes, Tripper, where are you? Are you on the can or something? Bobby Orr, call me back. This is Bobby Orr.
You're putting the shade to Bobby. Did you call him back, man?
I did. I had to make sure I stayed regular, and then of course I called him back.
Oh, you're a beauty. You're a beauty.
Okay, I want to touch on something because you did something. I want to say, is it between the Toronto and Carolina job, Carolina the second time, you worked in the NHL war room, and is that the right timing?
No, yeah, the timing's right, but it was. I didn't work there. I just went every Thursday night. I'd go up there and hang out with those guys. Yeah.
Okay, so I got to ask because I'll be. I don't think you can get in trouble. Mark Twain, you don't have to have a good memory when you tell the truth. I have, and I'm not going to ask you to get involved with me at all on it. But I have some concerns, and specifically in the Hurricane series against Boston. I think it's the hardest job in the world. And I have some concerns that have been there for a while about the officiating. I'm very, very proud to say, Mo, that some of the officials, countless officials, are some of my favorite people in the game, and I'm more proud than anything to call friends. But I want to make sure as a broadcaster, because everybody's going to make mistakes, that my approach is correct. First of all, I'm just another bozo on the bus broadcaster. But if I was still your broadcaster, what would your advice, having been in that war room, what would your advice be for me, when imperfection arises, and what my approach should be?
So I'll just tell you my experience with all of it, and then you can find your own message from it. Going into the war room was really, really impactful for me. Mike Murphy, Chris King, Stephen Walkham, all the people that are really important to our game in there, they work hard at it. Like they're trying to get. Now, I mean, I had an event in the playoff round with Calgary that I disagreed with, but that was important for me to see how hard they work, because when behind the bench and the emotion's really high, that's the feeling, right? That they don't care. They make the call and they just move on. But that's not the case. Like these guys are competitive too, right? They don't want to be wrong. I think when it comes to the refereeing, like certainly because you're attached to a team, you're embedded in a team, there's a slant to it for you. None of these guys want to be wrong. They truly don't. I think we're at such a threshold. It's kind of like, the players are outpacing the referees' abilities to make the right call every time. I don't think they can anymore. Anymore is not the right word. I think the gap, this game happens so fast. Let me give you an analogy, and you remember this. There that a linesman used to go down on one knee at the blue line and kind of point, right? And he, one of the first things I remember in the NHL was those linesmen were never, ever wrong. Like you'd watch it back on the tape and you go, oh my God, made that call. Because there was only about 3 or 4 guys crossing the line at any one time and they were moving slow, it didn't matter. Now with the hard gap defenses that we've got, there's 8 guys at the line. It's lightning fast. And there's no way to be right all the time. I think that's the same. When they increased the standard of hooking and obstruction in 2006, our game went through the roof. It's way, way, way better than it was. Because of that, and players will always play right on the edge, a little trip, a little hook, a little embellishment. It happens too fast for them to be right all the time. So this is me talking to you in the summer, so to say, for us, the off season, where there's no emotion. Now I'm screaming just like everybody else when they miss a call that affects the game, but the game is too fast for them to get it right as it is applied to the video that you have access to. Those two things don't match anymore. It's too fast. They can't get it right, and they certainly can't get it right all the time. It's probably more miraculous how often they do get it right, and then it will never withstand the scrutiny that we have now based on the video. So my complaint was, the video that everybody saw about the incident with Mark Scheifele in mine was completely different than the one that I saw, because we had a blue line camera that we could zoom in on it. And then we could still have a debate. But for what I said, there's no way, of course, so the refs missed it. Actually, I had no expectation that the referees should be able to see that. The stuff is happening too fast. I get it for you. I mean, how do you handle that? Because you've got some great fans in Carolina that man, they're fans. They're not supposed to be objective, right? Every affront is an assault against the Hurricanes. How do you balance that? I would ask yourself, is it relative to the rest of the game first? I understand the penalty that was called 2 months ago, but is it relative to the rest of the game? And that's where maybe our frustration comes, where they let this go. And you think, okay, that's the slight standard. Every referee's different, right? And we all have a book on all of them on what they call. So when that standard starts to move a little bit, then you can say, you know what, based on these 3 events earlier, I think that's got to be a call. But I rarely beef the referees anymore, because I think they're at their threshold of competence, and that's not an insult. I just think this game is so darn fast they can't be held to the video standard.
Well, I think to help the video standard and to create more room on the ice, because you, as one of the elite coaches in our game, I mean, I know our coaching staff has looked, and they have video evidence of the number of goals, and it's not a referee's fault, that go off a referee's body or referees skate throughout the course of the season, and God forbid the playoffs. So if you take one guy off the ice, don't put him in the timekeeper's box with full video capabilities. Then you don't have egos getting ruffled between the two guys. You rotate it. So, sometimes you're in the box there with the video. Sometimes you're on the ice. You're true teammates. You don't have those redirect. It's just to help deal with the quickness when you say the game's too fast.
One of the biggest challenges they have is getting men to skate. The quality of skating that a referee has to do is off the charts, right? And now, so when you're putting that, so Tripp, I'm quite a bit older than you, but there are guys that are reffing in the league. They're almost my age. Like I can't get up and down the stairs, let alone get up and down the ice with these guys, right? So I understand that, because that skating, that's a real challenge, getting out of the way of pucks. And this game happens so fast. Just think of all the number of players that get hit with pucks. The referees are. I'm pretty sure Jimmy Rutherford said that about 25 years ago. At some point in time, the refereeing will be done remotely. And then he looked at me and he said, "And so will the coaching." That's the next phase. At some point, there won't be any. At some point, there won't be any coaches behind the bench, and it's probably going to be a lot of owners out there that wouldn't mind that, but he believes that at some point it'll be just players.
I just I have to tell you, I didn't know what it was going to be like, but I just called games off a monitor for our qualification round in the first round. It's a little different, because I don't have control over replays, but you get to story tell more, and it went pretty smoothly. I said even at one point on Fox, I said I wouldn't be surprised if I never travel again. That'll help me get the six-pack back. But
yeah, you know what, Tripp? Like I feel that way. I'm sure. I can tell you, it's tougher to do your job behind the bench just because there's less energy in the building and your voice isn't covered off as much. But from sitting and listening to these guys do the game, it maybe just will present a different style of doing the game. It might be different than what you're used to, but from my point of view, the guys who've been doing the game have been real good. And that you haven't noticed that. I haven't noticed a major difference. So maybe that is a change for the game.
Yeah, we'll see. Because I haven't had a chance. I spoke with you privately when this happened. And again, one of our themes has been being a player's coach, but players always knowing where you stand. I want you to talk to me about typically, and I'm sure it varies, when you finish a game, what happens between the final buzzer? Does it vary if you're the road coach, home coach, and your presser? Okay, so like however people fall in line, and if they've had that zoom in blue line cam on the skate that, creates an incredibly scary injury for a centerpiece to your organization, Tkachuk on Scheifele. My point is, if I'm one of your players, I don't care, like which side you're on this one. That's my coach digging in for one of my players. Who cares? Fourth line guy, leadership guy. That's how and Andrew Ladd said, you more than any other coach, you'd be willing to run through a wall. Can you tell me typically the time that elapses between final buzzer and your presser, and when you're walking to your presser, do you think diligently about what your approach is going to be? Do you have a plan, or do you just react spontaneously?
So you're off the bench. I rarely go into the room unless it's playoffs, right? But you get off your bench. I only go in the room regular season if I think they need me to. If you win, they never really need you to. If you lose on certain nights. So I'll go into, and depends on what the setup. You go into the coach's office where I'm going to get somewhere between 15 and 25 minutes at times, maybe less, to kind of. So what I'll do is there something in the third period I need to see? So you'll run through your video, you'll watch that, and then, I'll fire it out again. It's kind of the way I work in between periods. What are the three most impactful things in the game? Why did we win that game? Why did we lose that game? And all the coaches get their opportunity to speak. At that point in time, the players are meeting with the media, and we have our director of media relations, Scott Brown, or one of his assistants in the room, just trying to find out where the direction's going. And that's important for me to have an understanding of what the players are being asked, so you know what you're going to get. And then I'll walk out and I'll have kind of, the first thing I'm going to do is set my tone, right? Before I'm walking up, I check see where I'm at, make sure it's fair. Like if where it is when you're real angry, you say stupid things, right? And they're not measured particularly well. So I'll check that. And I've done it enough now that, I've got a lot of time walking up to the mic. I'm careful with what I say, but I work really hard at the media. I'll tell you, it's not really a story. I'm driving home. I'm with Maple Leafs my first year, and everybody who knows Toronto, I'm driving home on the Gardner, and then I hit the 427, which is halfway home for me, and I'm in a full panic, and a full panic about what I've said that day. I think I've done about 18 interviews, 5 radios. Like it was a full-on Toronto day, and I can't even remember what I said. And I know the questions all get asked differently. So my answers were all different, and I hit the 427. I said, that's it. I'm never, ever, ever going to worry about what I say in the media. I'm going to say stupid things. I'm going to make mistakes. I'll probably have to apologize because I said something I really, truly didn't mean, but I don't worry about it anymore. So I walk up, I say what I think. I'm not trying to be cute with the truth here. I try to tell the truth on everything. I mean, I can remember when I'm 1 or 2 times I've been asked about an injury or something that I laid off the truth, or I didn't go into detail, but I work really hard at telling them the truth, walking away from it and not thinking about it. So I get up there hot sometimes. Sometimes I get there and mad at myself, and I'll say that coach was no good. I got no problem saying that. He coached 1,600 games. You're going to have some tough nights. But I measure, by the time I hit that, I guess what I'm mindful of is the people that I'm talking to are Jets fans for the most part, and they deserve a little insight. They deserve to know what I'm thinking about when I'm doing stuff. At the same time, I'm getting paid to know what I'm doing, so I don't need to lay out every player or every decision that I make.
Boy, you keep giving me new ideas. I'm going to have you here until 2021. Couple more things that I want to get into your thoughts about some special players and people in your hockey journey. First thing is, because this year, when we were coming in to play Winnipeg, it was in December, and I've really enjoyed getting to know our mutual friend. I was intimidated by him for a while. I don't know why, but, because he's a teddy bear beneath it all, Brian Burke. And Berkey told me, he goes, Mo, wow, Coach of the Year candidate. Look at what's happened to that blue line, off-season subtractions, with everything, between Myers, Trouba, obviously Big Buff, and then injuries. Gosh, Maurice, one of the true underrated defensemen in the game. And Berkey said, you want to talk about an Adams caliber job. At this point in your career, Mo, you just say whatever you think. I think, and I know how tough it is in a hockey market anywhere in Canada, Winnipeg no exception, I thought you did an outstanding job this year. Yeah, I know you're going to give me an honest-to-God answer. How do you think you did?
Yeah, I think the staff did one of the best jobs we've ever done, in truth. And that, we lost 4. The Buff one was different, but we lost half our blue line with Ben Sherratt and almost all of our weight back there. And then you lose Buff. So 4 of your 6 defensemen are gone on all of the big ones, right? Neil Pionk come in, and boy, was he a player for us. And then we found some really good men in there, and we scratched and clawed. But the Brian Little injury, so if you lose your number 2 centerman and your number 1 defenseman, after you've kind of gone through this transition where you've lost 4 or 5 really important guys, that I would have thought would have broke most of the team. So I would say that what I'm talking about is in the scope that the coaching staff has an impact, we were really good. But the story there isn't that the coaches got this team to survive. It was our leadership, like Blake Wheeler going from wing to centerman, and his numbers go way down because of it, because he's not playing with Mark and with KC. And then all of our other injuries. The year that Connor Hellebuck had, the November that he had made all of it possible, because we were we're losing players where our injuries were insurmountable on top of the back end. And I think by the time the season's done, we're 10th in goals against in the NHL. So, and a big chunk of that is just Connor Hellebuck. But insofar as I've never, ever had a year where the hits just kept on coming. And the ending of the year was exactly like the whole year trip, because I felt a little bit, but our season gets canceled after we play in Edmonton and we win our 4th game in a row. And we were finally healthy. We had our whole team in, and we had added Aikens and we'd added DeMello. And, you know, we're not probably as powerful as we were the year before, but we got belief now, right? We win 4 in a row. Our analytics are really trending in a positive way. Here we go. And the best part, we had a terrible schedule. Our schedule for the last month was Christmas. It was 3 games in 5-day blocks with 2 days in between. It was like we had one back-to-back in the last month of the season. Like we're only 2 points behind Dallas, man. We're on a roll. Boom, the season ends. We come back. We got a whole bunch of challenges with the COVID. And I don't mean to say that lightly. There are people out there who had far greater challenges than we did. And then we go in 2 minutes and we lose our number 1 center. By the end of the game, we lose our shooter and we lose one of our top penalty killers. And you're going like, uncle, you know? So it was by far the most challenging year of hits that I've ever had. And maybe the most rewarding in watching guys like Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler and Josh Morrissey. And that doesn't do it justice, because Nathan Boyo and those kind of guys, we had some really good competitive men give everything they had. So you asked that question at the start about getting into a room, Andrew Ladd said, and telling them you got more to give, you got more to give. And I did that as hard this year. We got to play harder. We got to play harder, to the point where I think we got them and we had lost. And it was actually in Carolina, and we went back to back into Columbus the next night. We lost both those games, and we played our butts off. And we had like 8 guys out of our lineup. I get that, but we played our butts off in both those games and lost them. And that was the only point. And I'm looking up here, Trip, because my schedule's on the wall. That was the only point the year that I was worried that my team might break, and then we get our break. Our reading week, our all-star break, we come back and we play the Boston Bruins at home. We lose 2-1, and we were fantastic. And then we took off from that point on. We beat St. Louis back-to-back. We beat Washington. We were a good hockey team after that.
Boy, I'm thinking about the game in Carolina, because that was, the Hurricanes, that was the game right before their break. And you guys, even with those pieces out, you guys played an outstanding hockey game. I want to say was I remember if Peter or if Mrazek or Reimer played and Justin Williams, it was his second game back. You coached Justin. He was exceptional.
Yeah. So we played as hard as, I don't know the quality of our game would say that that's an ESPN classic, but I walked off the bench going, I got nothing but love for these guys, because they just played their asses off tonight. Yeah,
no doubt about it. Well, that was my read. Okay, I want to ask you, like in the United States, the first guy I want to ask you about, he's an American-born captain, but playing in Winnipeg, and I just don't feel like we know what he is as a player, Blake Wheeler. But tell me about what makes this guy, and you've had some phenomenal captains, too many to mention right now over the years. What makes this guy near and dear to Paul Maurice?
Because he's completely unique in that. So you mentioned Matt Sundin's name. So Matt Sundin was this elite player that had taught himself to drive, like his practice habits. But he was a quiet man. Like Matt Sundin was the perfect captain for that team, believe it or not, because you couldn't be out there every day in the media pumping tires in the environment that Matt's played in, the years that Matt's played in. He was perfect for that. Blake Wheeler is a heart and soul guy. Like I've never had a guy as consistent. That's not the right way to start the answer. The right way is, when we first got together, he was still trying to define himself as a player. Like he'd get off to very slow starts and then kind of just dig in. And that came out of my mouth before I realized where I was. And then just play so damn hard that only good things could happen. And then he just figured it out that that's all I need to do. And then he went full bore at that, from his conditioning program to what he eats to how he lives his life. So that he can drive harder than his opponent, so in the third period he can break them. That's his mentality. And then I see, but I've always kind of described him as this kind of snorting alpha male, right? Like he's You watch his press conferences. They walk in 5 minutes after the game. He hasn't come down yet. He's wired. Like, he's looking for a fight if you want one. But he also has this grace about him where, boy, we've had some kids come in, right? 18, 19 years old, lots of skill, speed, at times a little light in the corners, you know, like all the things that young players go through. And I'm thinking, here come Blake's going to come down and snap on one of these kids, slides down and puts his arm around him. Like, he's constantly trying to help them, which is unusual when usually when a guy works that hard is he's just going to snarl at him. He's just going to say, well, work as hard as I do and all your problems are going to disappear, because that's what happened with Blake. But he has this grace about him and this resilience about him. He is a special, special man, the right guy for the Winnipeg Jets. And I think his impact, his work ethic and his impact will be with this organization for a long time after he's done.
Powerful stuff. Mark Scheifele.
So Mark is somewhat like Blake in a very focused desire to get better. And what Mark will do is ask a million questions on how to do it. He's going to seek out the best people. He has, in a good way, almost a childlike, so almost a Howard Chuck love of the game. When things are right, he loves coming to the rink. Loves playing hockey. He would sit here all day long. He'll watch hockey all night long. He just loves the game. So because of that, he doesn't fatigue in trying to get better, right? He's out there working on his hands every day, small plays that he's trying to improve. And he's eventually going to become one of those players that you're all saying, you know, if he wasn't in Winnipeg, and I hate when people say that, he would get blown up for a lot of different aspects of his game are very, very good. There's going to come a point in time, and I think you're going to see that next year and the year after when all of those aspects come together, right? So he's an interesting cat. He's got the NHL record for road goals in a playoff series. So in the hardest part, and that's in Nashville series, in the hardest part, playing on the road in the playoffs, he excelled. So that's there, that part there, that grit, that determination, his hand skills, and some of the things that he's done with his offensive reads are just getting better and better and better every year. And then you look at what happened to our hockey club, right? Now it's augmented the fact that Brian Little's not in our lineup, but when Mark Scheifele goes down, we scored 6 goals in 4 games, and we're an offensive team, but that's just a huge hole for us to fill. So Mark's going to be a guy that's going to put it all together. I think he's going to score 40 plus goals, and he's going to be a dominant force on the ice.
You had a close kinship with him, with the Leafs. You touched upon him a few minutes ago. What did you learn about Matt Sundin when you became his coach that you didn't know when you were an opposing coach?
Oh, he is a physically fit man, and that's more from watching him when he first came into the league. Like, they're to be great there. He drove hard every day. He was a quiet man, had a good sense of humor. But all of these guys, I guess I'm going to put him in that class of that Ron Francis kind of player, right? The Tom Barrasso, the Paul Coffeys, those kind of guys. This guy was an elite, talented player, but that would have just made him really, really good unless he had driven his body the way he did. Like, he worked so very, very hard. And his temperament, coaching, being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs and not winning the Stanley Cup is a tough job. His temperament never changed with his teammates, and he wasn't casual about it. I mean, he snapped more than once. He was a lot more intense than people thought he was, but a wonderful example of a guy that's in the right market. He was the right guy to be captain of that team. He was a powerful leader in that room, and I think his consistency with game. One of my favorite pure hockey memories is his 500th goal, right? We're playing Calgary at home. He scores the hat trick in overtime, shorthanded to win the game and to score his 500. So that was kind of like your perfect Matt Sundin Toronto Maple Leafs moment. I mean, just a ripper on Kiprusoff, I think, bar down. That was outstanding.
Your next guy, like you, falls in the category of being in my inner circle, and you coached him for a long time. I certainly hope as a player he finds his rightful place in the Hall of Fame. Roddy Brindamore. But I want to tell you, when Rod first became coach, he told me, because there's a coaches conference at the NHL draft, right after he got named coach, he said the first guy to come up to him, and it meant a lot to him, and say, Roddy, if there's anything I can do, now as a head coach in the league, I'm here for you any day that ends in a Y. Tell me about that, because I know that it meant a ton to Roddy.
So part of that is the way Roddy and I ended up as player and coach, and it would have been warm and fuzzy, right? So we trade for him. I think he's just felt that the world's come to an end. He's just left a really powerful team in Philadelphia. Little did he know that he'd win an Eastern Conference and the Stanley Cup in Carolina. And then, so I kind of come in and out on that, and I come back. And for me, Roddy was struggling a little bit more. And he was still a good player, but he was minus 19 early in the year, which is hard to do. And he will argue, and rightfully so, that he wasn't the driver of that minus 19. But I sit him out in Pittsburgh as the captain of the team. One of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. And like all proud players, and he would be right in thinking, he'd be thinking that I'm nuts, right? This is BS. But I need to win that game, right? And part of that is that we don't go into Pittsburgh and win very much at that time. And, they're going to be the Stanley Cup champions. So I made it. He said he was not very happy with me. And I think that's basically the way our relationship ended. But it wasn't personal for me, right? So the next phase is I hire him as an assistant coach because he's interested. His career comes to an end. I still think he's still sour at me because he's coaching because I said his career came to an end. But the question with Roddy is going to be, is he going to let his personality come out? Roddy, a very, very quiet guy, kind of grinding his teeth, right? I never really saw his personality. And then we were in Alberta once, in Calgary, I believe, and he got an award for some work that he was doing for a charity. He got up and he spoke, and he just blew the doors off me. I didn't know he was that articulate, that bright, that funny, that gracious. And I thought, well, wow, there's a lot more to this guy than I know. And I knew he loved the game. So I thought that, I like bringing players into coach, because if they can make that transition to hard work, and I know, Roddy's legendary in the gym, but does he want to watch the video that you got to watch to be a coach? So once that he got on the staff, there's no doubt this guy's going to be a head coach, and he's also going to, and he's tripped. This guy is good, right? Like, not whether you like him, my feelings about him have nothing to do. The quality of work, the consistency that his team plays at, the energy level that they play at. I watched a lot of the website stuff to pick stuff up off him, and he's really, really good. And it's one of those ones, there's players that when a player ends his career like that, they're never going to like you ever. But that doesn't stop you from doing the right thing. If Roddy Brindamore ever needed some advice at that point, I wanted to let him know. We worked together. We coached together, right? He's still probably mad at me. He's probably still mad at me because the guy's in such good shape, he could probably still be playing. But this guy's a good coach, and I wanted to make sure he knew that if there's anything I could do for him, and I meant it. Like I cheer for the guy, even though he's probably still angry at me.
I don't know. I can tell you that meant a ton to him, because as close as we are, how close I am with Rod, and I know when he tells me that, and he knows how close we are, and and he made a decision too, which I think sometimes we've talked about Jimmy Rutherford in this Digging In episode. He made a decision to retire with big time cash left on his contract. That's a pretty impressive thing that I don't know has been spoken about enough. Right.
Well, that's for Roddy, because I think his play wasn't where it used to be, as most players. And I think, and I'm speaking in a place that I shouldn't, but I think for Roddy, it was going to be, I'm either going to play at the level that I think I can play at, or I'm not going to play. And everybody says that. All those older great players say it, but it's not true, right? There's not a lot of them that can assess their own game. And that's why they're great, right? You have to have that inner belief that I'm one of the greatest in the world to be as great as you can be. But the problem is it changes. You get to a point where you're not one of the greatest in the world, but your contract is, and you still think you are. So you bang out a couple coaches toward the end, and then you retire. But to his credit, he didn't do that.
I thought he handled it. He epitomized class. I mean, gosh, Mo, I mean, back, after he was part of that sensational line with Jeff O'Neill and Sammy Kapanen and then Roddy's BBC line, you caught Ronnie Francis at the end, and then he was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a gargantuanly tough task for a coach.
That one might have been even tougher for me because I was kind of straight through with Ronnie, and not tougher for me in that he was hard to deal with. Ronnie basically coached me. All right. So this guy's unusual. The first time I sat down with him, he was in Pittsburgh. They just lost to Montreal, and I asked him about the series, and I've watched it very closely, and he detailed that series like a coach who had studied it. Like he was, and there's some insights that I had to go back and look at it again because he picked up some stuff that I had missed. This guy's got an elite hockey brain, right? But he's not a real fast guy, but he's fifth all time. Guy's elite. So he would work me too, right? He'd come down to my office and say, "Hey, Paul, nobody really gets that sarcasm. These guys are all way too young for that. So you just relax." Or sling by and say, "Well, we got a couple of things slipping here. Maybe we got to tighten it up a little bit." He had that great feel. So when you get to the point in his career, and he's not Ronnie Francis anymore, but that happens to everybody, I got to start shaving him back a little bit more. But probably 3 or 4 times over the course of my relationship with Ronnie, my job was in jeopardy. And I'm sure Jimmy went to him and said, "Hey, do I need to change the coach?" And Ronnie probably saved my butt 3 or 4 times. And at the end of the day, I don't know that I saved his, right? He ended up being traded. But I think the advantage that I have now is both men coached. Ronnie's a really, really good general manager, They would understand it now, right? Not all players understand it when they go through it. It's part of why they're great players. They don't see it and they don't understand it. But both men are NHLers in a different capacity now, though they would look back. Ronnie Francis would be fairly close to Jim Rutherford in some ways in terms of a mentor for me, even though I'm him, because he also joined the staff. And he was the first guy that kind of said, "Hey, give the chance." And I was the opposite of what I thought. I thought Ronnie, but hey, you got to play the old guys. He wanted the skill in the lineup. He wanted the kids to play. So I learned a lot. And as I go in my career, there's lots of situations that come up, and I can hear Ronnie saying something to me about the power play or about how to handle guys, when to squeeze. And so Ronnie Francis had a big impact on me, for sure.
By the way, speaking of one of those kids, it was supposed to be a pilot episode digging in, but it went so well with Shane, as you called him, Wilbur Willis. And you told him right at the end of preseason, "Hey, Wilbur, walking out to the ice." You said, "Hey, Wilbur, will you just start shooting the puck instead of dishing it off because you're playing with, these household names?" Yeah. You talked about that. Yeah. So that's a situation where you did the right thing with a young player right there in Wilbur.
Well, the most important thing between a coach and a player is the coach and a player have to agree with what the player is good at, right? So if you're a power play guy and you think you're a half wall guy, Tripp, and I don't think you're a half wall guy, until we can come to some agreement that we both agree on what you are good at, you and I are never, ever getting along, because I'm not putting you on the half wall and you are going to be grinding your teeth at me your whole. So can skate, he can do a bunch of things. But these kids always come in, and for the most part, they want to keep somebody happy. We want to keep Ronnie happy. Like, shoot the puck, man. We have to decide what you're good at first. And once we decide what you're really good at, you got to start with that and sell that every night. Because all the stuff that you're not good at, we'll take our time and we'll build that. We'll get better at it. But if all the stuff you're not good at is there and you don't do what you are good at, I can't use you, man. I can't put you on the ice. Willie, I couldn't believe it. I shot like a ton. He's got to start shooting the damn puck, man.
Yeah. I'm going to make this quick, but you just brought me back, and I got to use this because of our brotherhood. I don't know why, but I just thought about when you sent me down in Madison Square Garden, okay? After the game, Canes got beat pretty good. And, you're my friend. We've known each other since we were teenagers. Now you're for my shot of espresso, you're my NHL head coach. Well, you certainly made me feel good because it's right outside the room. There's Gretzky, Janet Gretzky. So he was playing for the Rangers. And you said, Trip, I'm going to send you to the American League. I hear you're playing great there. I'll see you soon. As your color analyst.
Yeah. That would sound like just most of them. You know what? One thing I learned, Trip, is when you're delivering somebody, don't wait till the end, right? Because they're not going to remember anything you say to them anyway, except you're going down. So short and crisp is I don't know. I think I've coached about 600 players and probably sent down 800 players. And I figured out about at 300, the long-winded rub their back just doesn't work. Just get to it and get on with it.
Usually my memory is like an elephant. That night at MSG, the bus is way down the ramp. Were you on the bus when I gave this speech?
I don't know. My memory is way different than yours.
Oh, you remember that?
No, okay, probably. Yeah, I remembered it.
I can't imagine Jimmy was either, Jimmy Rutherford. Okay, just because we got beat pretty good. And we had travel issues coming in the night before. It was a back-to-back. I think we played Ottawa at home. And we had to land in Philly and bust up because my roommate, God rest his soul, was Steve Chase on. And because I remember I'd go in and I wasn't dressing. I was like your third goalie, all right? And Chase, I get my room key and I go up to the room and, it's Steve Chase on. I grew up here in Detroit, watched him as a Red Wing. And he goes, hey, kid, go take a walk. So I didn't even have anywhere to go in my room. Anyway, after the game, I knew I was never coming back. All right. But I know now what an NHL bus is like after a loss. I mean, you can hear a pin drop, especially a Jim Rutherford bus. And so Steve Weeks, our goalie coach, was actually going to drive me back to New Haven. Pickup truck was right out there outside of MSG. And I said, hang on, Weeksy, I want to go, talk to the boys. So
I wasn't there for that.
I went on the bus. And they just got pummeled. And I said, hey guys, I just want to thank you. These have been 4 or 5 of the best days of my life. Good luck. You guys are going to be just fine. I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed it. and I hear after the fact, my dear friend Chuck Hayden turns to John Forson and goes, because I didn't know him at the time.
Yeah.
And he goes, who the hell is this guy?
Oh, I'm sure there were a few more things said at the back of the bus too, Trip.
Well, because they probably weren't happy because who came? I played in the A card game coming up with Primo, Stu Grimson. I want to say Kevin Howard, the A card game, and I walked it with spades. So I actually won $700 or $800. I'm like,
they were waiting for you, man.
Okay, a couple more things, and I'll let you skedaddle. When I dug in with your dear friend Pete DeBoer, I want to ask you a couple of questions that when I did my prep, you asked me to ask him. Windsor Spitfires, right across actually the river, right over, on this side of the house. Paul Maurice, Joel Quenneville, Pete DeBoer, Claude Julien. The list goes on and on. Why has the great OHL franchise, the Windsor Spitfires, developed so many fine NHL head coaches?
Yeah. I don't know is the simplest answer. I mean, I know about, I think Pete and I, because DJ Smith is in on that list too, right? So there's 5 former captains, Spitfires are head coaches in the NHL. I would say the things that I don't know, that's a pretty, Windsor's at the time, pretty gritty town, right? And that hockey was tough. So if you could kind of captain those teams, or maybe there's some leadership there. I know that Pete DeBoer and I were in a different environment. We learned from Pete Germanis Jr. and Jim Rutherford what professionalism was. So what you wouldn't know then, Chip, so that's the mid-'80s. junior hockey is truly on a tiered system, right? There's a handful of high-end organizations, and they do very well: Peterborough, Oshawa, Ottawa, and then there's some bottom organizations. As a matter of fact, my father wasn't going to let me play for the Windsor Spitfire when I was drafted there until CompuWare bought them. So, but you got like a professional, NHL guys running your junior team, so you watch them. So Pete and I watched Tom Webster as a head coach, coached in the NHL twice. You got Jim Rutherford, who's a Hall of Fame in the NHL. You got Pete Kermanis, a Hall of Famer. So Pete and I come in, and they run that program the right way from the very start. And we watch and we learn. And that's now both of us then also get to work in that environment, right? So I coach for these guys for 8 years. Pete coaches for them for almost 15 years, I think. So we got kind of indoctrinated in a pro way of running things, and that's how we got to the NHL for sure.
Super answer. I can remember like it was yesterday. I can even remember what end of the Hurricanes locker room you were at that you did your pregame, post-pregame skate availability. Pete DeBoer was coaching against you for the first time in the NHL for the Florida Panthers. And there's no doubt about it. The two of you had dinner the night before. Talk about the ultra special nature of that relationship. Pete talked about it with me last week.
Yeah, so we've done it all kind of together. We were roommates. We coached together. We stood in each other's wedding parties, and then just kind of have this life in the NHL. And I think that the Vegas team is for me the team to beat in the playoffs. They've got just an incredible blend of skill and grit. They're older men. They're ready to win. But Pete and I actually a real good balancing act when we coach together. So his strengths are he can decide what he thinks is black and white right away, very quickly, and he doesn't burn a lot of energy worrying about whether he's right or wrong. His record would tell you he's right most times, right? He can distill between what's important and what's not very, very quickly, and his delivery is really good. So I worked with the World Championships. I worked with him in junior. He can hold a room, right? He can command a room with his tone and with his intellect. This guy's got a law degree. He's a very, very bright guy. So we balanced off each other too, because I will think about the longer process of all things, right? Analyze all things out as far as I can and then come back to where I need to. So between the two of us, we had a pretty good run as junior coaches. We ran the team together. I was the head coach, but there were two coaches on the bench, and he ran the back end, I ran the front end. Every once in a while we'd switch. So he has that gift. And then he's funny as hell. I don't know how much time you spent with him, and he's all serious now, but this guy's got a sense of humor. So I think from a coaching and laughter point of view, that was my most fun time. Pete and I are running that team, and we laughed and laughed and laughed and worked and learned the game and talked hockey, and it was just a great starting point.
Right. He laughed so hard he lost his bucket. Hey, I got to ask you the same question that you had me ask him.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Because he's done it now in Vegas for the first time. What's the difference for you between beginning to coach a team to begin a season and when you do it to hit the ground running within a season itself?
You feel way more prepped when you're coming in at the start of the season because you've had this summer, you've watched an awful lot of video, and then you've got way more time to prepare your team. So in that way, it's much easier. But emotionally, it's pretty easy to step into a team halfway through because, first of all, big shock, coaching changes. The coach gets changed, something's broken, or the perception is that something's broken. And you have an opportunity to kind of be on the bench and assess. When you're coming in the summer, you're on the bench and you're trying to correct and fix the plans that you've already tried to place. So when you come in, I remember coming back into Carolina, I think we got beat by Pittsburgh 5-2. We lost my first game. We lost the opening faceoff, and Nick Wallin pinched up over their blue line. He was our lead player. And I just spent the whole night on the bench going, like, what are we doing? Like, why is he doing that? So you kind of have this for a little while to go, okay, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. Start doing this, and let's go that way. So there's an ease there. Boy, like Pete had no time, right? So I'm driving home. So I get fired by Toronto. I go to university. I have to take this class at the University of Windsor across from me. My mother-in-law lives there. So I drive to Windsor Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I take 2 classes and I go back to Toronto where my wife and kids are. So the last day, so I finish the class, I write my exam. I'm driving home. My phone rings. It's Jim Rutherford. He says, making a coaching change. And I kind of laughed. I said, you know what, Jimmy, I thought you would. I thought you would because you guys been grinding for a while. So what are you going to do? And he goes, I said, have you talked to your new guy yet? And he says, I'm talking to him right now. And so I just start laughing, right? The man's crazy. He's back in like that. Nobody's done that before in hockey. It's not bringing me back in. And so 10 minutes later, I hang up the phone. I call my wife and I said, you know that bag that I used for my suits, my garment bag that broke? I need you to run out as fast as you can and buy me a new one because I got to be in Raleigh tonight. So that's how things happen, right? So you move in, you're in Raleigh, and you're in the locker room the next day. That's the whirlwind that it goes through. So you have no prep time. Given the choice, I start at this training camp and give yourself a training camp to get through. But man, there's some great juice about jumping in with a team halfway through for sure.
That's neat. That's a great answer. A lot of things, as close as we are, I'm learning for the first time. I don't know. Hopefully, maybe this will teach you something that I've never told you. So after the World Cup, the last several years, and you were you were with Ralph Kruger with Team Europe. So the Canes are playing in Edmonton. And after a morning skate, I'm in talking to Leon Draisaitl. He doesn't know how close you and I are. And I asked him about you, and he lit right up and spoke about how much he enjoyed having coach with Team Europe and working specifically on video and what an asset you were for him, and what an asset the video through you it was for him. Can you speak of that? Was a heck of an endorsement from Leon Draisaitl, one of the great players in the game, and how you've adapted, I guess, to the modern day player.
So it was a really unique set of circumstances. So we get off to a horrific start in the round robin kind of warm up part of that tournament. We get beat 7-1 by the Team North America, and then we're getting beat 4-1, and we're getting pounded. Leon's a real young guy, so he gets sat on the bench. So we're in Canada at the time. So the people in Edmonton are up in arms. This is terrible. How could we do this to him? But he was really struggling. So we pulled some video. I went in and took him through it. And like all young players, I mean, think about what that would be like for like a 19-year-old kid. It's the World Cup. So it's not the NHL. It's worse, right? The greatest European players in our game are in this room. And then he's playing against Team Canada. So and now what do you want to do? You want to show you're a good player. You want to prove it, right? So every time you touch the puck, you're going to make some magic happen, except you're playing against the best players in the world, and that's just not going to happen. And that was basically the video. Almost have more confidence in yourself than trying to make that play. Have the confidence, and I've said before, have the confidence not to make the play. That's where the great ones get to. They don't force it anymore. They've got confidence that the right play is going to come along. So he goes out and scores a hat trick the next game, right? So that really had nothing to do. It had nothing to do with it. But he scores a hat trick. Everybody looks real smart. He's having a great time, and then this guy's a beast, right? Like he is an absolute player, and he was going to be great regardless of that meeting. But I really enjoyed it. He's a nice human being. He's one of the good names, good guys in the game that the fans should get to know. He's a good person.
I can tell you, I thought he played without question the best game of any player in Raleigh this past season. Aho, and he went McDavid was hurt, and they went toe to toe. I remember Sebastian's mom was there, and they were both, I mean, brilliant. and Edmonton eventually won in overtime. As your friend, I was because he didn't know we were friends. You know, that was really cool, that conversation. Speaking of coolness, my mom's off camera here, and she and I have been watching The Crown. And we've just gone through the 3 seasons. And one day years ago, you know, I walk into your office in Raleigh, and there you've got, I mean, it's as long as Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, you've got your Winston Churchill book. Okay. It had to be 1,500 pages. And I mean,
big one.
It's a biggie. And I'm trying to think, as you know, I've read all these books at least 5 or 7 times here in my library. Winston Churchill, very influential person in your life. One could make an argument the most influential person on planet Earth, or right in the candidates in the 20th century. Why Winston? What made Winston beyond monstrous?
Well, first of all, just for fun part of it is that the book itself is a great read. Like you don't get a lot of interesting historical figures that wrote as many letters as he did. So it's not as much about the conjecture whether it's an autobiography or if it's a biography. Like my wife has a book of leaders at home. I had read Winston Churchill, A Life, but the next one I read was a book on Stalin. And there's nothing in there about him. It's all conjecture because he never wrote anything down or he killed everybody who he talked to. There's nothing there. Winston Churchill is, you feel for every day of his life in that he wrote a letter to somebody about it. Okay, that's really cool. So that makes it fun. The next thing is if the first part of the book is accurate, when they're talking about his childhood, like there's no reason after the first 100 pages that this book is going to turn out the way it should, right? Like this guy has a tough start to life. And that's kind of that, it all goes back to your very first question, what's digging in? Now there's the guy, right? That he just never, ever, ever stopped digging. So I guess maybe sometimes when you're looking for some inspiration or a kick in the ass or whatever you need, I think about just that, you know, quit sniveling because you lost a game and you got another game coming up. When this guy's trying to pick the cities he's going to allow to be bombed so that fewer people actually die. That guy's got a tough day. Just so he's the kind of guy for me that's my kind of quiet kick in the butt when I think I'm feeling sorry for myself. That maybe, you know, there's people that you don't think are full of greatness. Maybe they are. You just got to give them a chance. Like this guy would have been written off by just about everybody. And thank God for all of us, he wasn't.
I assume Winston's on the list. If there are any other outside of hockey figures, past or present, that you extract lessons from and make you a better head coach and contributing human being, who would those people be?
So my father, my brothers, I would say we've covered them. Jim Rutherford was a huge impact on mine. Tom Barrasso and I lived in Russia together for a year, and I learned about consistency from that guy. So, you know, never live a bad day twice, which has a tremendous amount of meaning when you understand what he went through with the health issues of one of his kids. Just powerful, impactful stuff that I'm constantly reminded about. Mark Chipman. Your and I friendship and conversations at times when the people, what I'm finding as I get older, I read a lot and I read a lot of really good books, but the best lessons aren't there. The best lessons of life, not always, you know, some of them are tragic lessons, are in the people that you cross paths with. So you and I are as good of friends as we have, but we're still only talking to each other. We talk to each other to set this up, but it's not like we're talking every day. But the impact that we've had maybe on each other's life is really important. And that's true of all of these people. I wouldn't say I have a whole lot of friends, but the ones that I do keep have had an incredible impact on my life, and I learn from them all the time.
Have you, as close as you and Tommy B are, because he wears his suit pants so high, as one of your players, Ray Whitney, used to say, he's the only guy that reaches over his shoulder to get his wallet. Have you considered adapting that way beyond, not the sub belly?
First of all, This is what I learned about Tom Barrasso and fashion. All right. He's so far ahead of me that I would never question nor critique anything that I had on. I'm pretty sure that the belt that he wears is more expensive than the suit that I wear. So Tommy gets a free pass on all sartorial decisions because he's just got way. He's out of my league. He's in the Vezina Stanley Cup League, and I'm in the American League.
My gosh, I feel the same way about him that you do. And, and he is not, like there's no materialistic nature to him. He went and coached with you in Russia. All right. But so I can tell this story. Oh, Tommy, and my gosh, when you had him, when he was playing as A level, even still in Carolina, his golden years with Buffalo, with Pittsburgh, but it was an art form to watch him. And so anyway, so we developed a trust, just like, and I said, Tommy, at one point, I said, how do you know Megan was the right one, his wife? And he said, well, I was at a party one night and, she probably would be the first to say that she maybe had one drink too many. And so she got in, I think he had a Rolls at the time, a Rolls Royce. And they were driving home and she was a little nauseous. He looked over and she got sick, but she got sick into her purse, not into the Rolls. And he said, that's when he knew.
Oh, he's a beautiful man.
But that guy will always be there for his friends, Tommy B.
Yeah,
always.
I mean, he goes to Russia with me for the experience, but I wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for him. And then there's a guy you just have to quietly watch. If you watch him and how he interacts and how disciplined he is with his decisions, so he's a great coach. And I didn't bring him here to Winnipeg after because I didn't have room on the staff, and I couldn't fire a guy here to make that happen. I think he's probably got a reputation of being a crusty guy. I found with his interaction with the players to be absolutely the opposite, like so giving, so well prepared that he's giving quality information. I don't know how much longer he's going to fight to stay in coaching, but he should be working somewhere for sure.
Well, he's definitely going to be digging in soon, digging in deep. And I might even put on a blazer and a pocket square. I never do for digging in, but for him, I might.
But it's going to get critiqued, just so you know. It better be a good one.
Oh, I'll go right back at Tommy B. Because we had a golf trip. We had a golf trip down in Florida, and he's such a competitor. All right. And I got up and dinner was on the line and I was off to a blazing start, 6-7 holes in. Tommy, he was irritable. All right. He was angry. He might've been the angry hornet. And I'm like, we were playing with a member from the club. I'm like, well, what do I do? Do I throw the match? Cause this guy's all fired up. He's playing with Tom Barrasso. Do I throw the match? But then I'm losing dinner. What do I do? I threw the match, but
I'm match, but he can afford it.
He was because back in you're playing in those days when he was a Hurricane, there was a bar there at the back, and then you put the broadcasters. Oh, we locked out. I mean, 4 seats, maybe right on the wall at the back of the plane. So facing the complete opposite way. So let's throw the broadcasters there. It was the best thing ever because once we got to our cruising altitude, it was different back then, but we'd sit there and have conversations. And so that's how I really got to know. And Tom Barrasso, as well he should be, based on everything he's gone through, he needs to trust you. And once he trusts you, he is so giving. And I've seen it myself in our friendship countless times. By the way, back there on that setup on the plane, I remember Kevin Hatcher playing for you near the end of his.
But Trip, there's a whole bunch of my life I don't want to know about. What happens at the back of the plane, man? You can't tell me that stuff. Even today, you can't. There's a line that can't be crossed, and what happens at the back of the plane is one of those lines.
Okay. And I just, you said some guy, you nicknamed him Snacks, and Hatch, one of my favorites. I mean, he did when I was making him, something and his pants split as he was playing with Langer, Darren Langdon. And anyways, I'll leave it at that. Mo, this has been everything I hoped it would be, and then some. You got anything for me before I bid you adieu?
No, but thank you. You know what? The nice part of our friendship is if you need to tell me something straight, you always do. But every time I get off the phone with you, I feel, or the Zoom call, I'm in a better mood. It's been nice reminiscing because it's a long career and you forget about those pieces. So I've enjoyed it today. Just even if nobody ever sees us, it was great seeing you, great talking with you again.
Amen. Ditto. Not to, bring the movie Ghost, but I love that movie. No, I forgot one question I have to ask you about. And I'll leave it because this is the right way to leave it with this question. My first year broadcasting, Pan Pacific Hotel in Vancouver. There's a big escalator going up to like the lobby level from the street level. And one of your assistant coaches, you had two great assistants. My first year broadcasting, Randy Ladiseur, we talked about earlier, and Tom Webster, God rest his soul. And Tom Webster had, because I was a goalie, I'd always tuned it out when a coach was talking about systems and everything like that. So Webby on an off day had said, Tripp, you want to come to my room and we'll look at some video and it'll be a good foundation for you. So I've gone for a run, Mo, and I'm coming up the escalator and I've got like 4 minutes to get to Webby's room. And the other side going down, a single guy, there's a cute girl, okay, and she's going down, and so I'm going up. I know I got to be in Webby's room, all right, for the video session. But you remember Clint Eastwood in The Line of Fire, when Rene Russo's walking away from the monument, and he goes, if she looks, she's interested. And he waits and waits, and finally Rene Russo looks. So I'm looking down, and I'm like, okay, if she looks, she's interested. And I'm almost hoping, don't look. I got to be in Webby's room for a video session. She looked. So anyway, I had to go back down the escalator. I was only about 10 minutes late. But Webby was very patient with me. God rest his soul. What will you remember most about a phenomenal human being, hockey man, and just in such an impactful life?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? What would you remember most about a guy? So that's the name that hadn't been brought up in this conversation about mentors. So I will be very close to his style of coaching my whole career because of the time that he spent with it. So what I remember the most, to answer your question, is how gracious he was with me. So the exact same thing that you went through. He wants to show you a video, right? Doesn't care where you are in your career. He wants to help you. So when I'm just starting to coach, he's brought me. I'm like 20 years old. He brought me on his staff, and he'd sit with me and go through video about what he was seeing. And he never had to do that, but he watched an awful lot of video which took time away from his family, and it was something that he didn't have to do, and it had a huge impact on my career. So with all of the things with Webby, and I hired him as an assistant. Those aren't the right terms either, right? I hired him as a mentor. I needed help. I was just a kid coaching in the NHL, and I brought him in, and he just continued to steer me and steer me and steer me. And none of that was to get him. So he'd been coached to coach the LA Kings, and he coached the New York Rangers. Was not for him to get back as a head coach in the NHL or to take my job. It was all about helping me out and helping me get better. So that's the legacy of Tom Webster. You and I aren't unique in that. That's everybody that Tommy crossed paths with. He was a hockey man through and through. And that was his vehicle of improving your life, was to spend that extra time with you because he cared about you. And that was just genuine. That's who Tom Webster was. The hockey world was really lucky to have him, and it's a sad loss. But for the fortunate few like you and I, whether it's a few years for you with Webby, and then when he's coaching with me, that time we spend together, we get to be better for it. It's a sad loss, but it was a life well lived in hockey by Tom.
Webby, thank you. Mo, carpe diem. I know my life is infinitely better because you're in it.
Yeah. Oh God! Like this, is there a record? And I don't mind. We'll talk till 5. Is this the longest podcast? Is this the record?
Let's get a number on that from our producer Adam the Admiral Holtzman. Where are we at, Admiral?
2.5 hours.
2.
That is a record. We went
Okay.
220 with Shady 80 Weeksy. We've just eclipsed it, Mo.
Listen. I think you get those nice watches, Panerai watches. The first person that can prove that they sat through the whole 2.5 hours should get a free watch. That's what I think.
What a promotion for Panerai.
Yeah. But how do you prove it? I guess when you'd send a picture with your ears bleeding, that might be or your eyes gouged out. That might be a way you could do it. So
my mom's over here. She didn't even make it the whole way through. She fell asleep for half of it.
Your mom read Winston Churchill's A Life. Half of she was done a half hour ago.
Well, I love you.
Brother.
I'll let you go carbo load because you lost a lot of everything this 2.5 hours.
I got to go get something to eat, brother. All right, Trip.
Love you, buddy.
Keep digging in, friend. I'll talk to you, man. We dug in
deep, baby. We dug in deep until the next time. Well, thank you, Mo. And boy, that was a fitting way to end with the better than great, the supremely great, God rest his soul, Tom Webster. And I would bet everything I have that Webby he's digging in. He's got the earth moving equipment out there in the sky. And I'm sure that he will enjoy this episode with two guys among countless others that he has mentored. So thank you, Mo, for 2.5 hours. Man, I feel like I wasted away to nothing. I might now actually get chiseled the challenge to get as chiseled as Rod the Bod. I want to again encourage all forms of feedback to our audio and YouTube platforms. And I want to thank our exclusive, because this was an extremely special episode, the exclusive presenting sponsor of this one, New Country Auto Group. Jared the Nooch Cantanucci, like Paul Maurice, an unconditionally loyal friend and just an incredibly talented professional. He was a great hockey player. Through prep school, Shattuck St. Mary's, 152 points in 50 games, and then at Hartford before following in the family footsteps with the New Country Auto Group and beyond multiple dealerships in New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Florida, BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, Ferrari, Lexus, list goes on and on. They hit every ball out of the park when it comes to what makes an auto group beyond stellar. NewCountryAutoGroup.com. So thank you to Nooch and thank you to New Country. And until the next time, let's all carbo load after 2.5 hours of this one. Thank you to Paul Maurice for digging in, and also thank you for pushing me along with Adam the Admiral Holtzman, our producer and my partner, for actually going with this concept, because it's been a ton of fun. Hope that you're all enjoying it, and I know you'll let us know how we can continue to grow and satisfy you, and we'll look forward to digging in with you soon.
We're digging in with Trip today, yeah. Today, yeah. Today, yeah. Today.